Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29.
Okay, you're all very welcome to this morning's meeting. In the room with me today, I have the Vice Chair, Kelly Armstrong, I have Andy Allen, and I have Anya Murphy. And on Starleaf, we have Mark Durkin and Alex Easton. Before I begin, any members of any declaration of interest that'd like to, at this stage? Andy?
Just in raising the next couple of items of business, Chair, Charity Trustee.
No problem. Okay, then I'm going to start with agenda item 1, which is apologies. I have an apology from Pam Cameron. Do we have any other apologies? No. Okay. I'll then move on to agenda item 2, excuse me, which is Chairperson's business. Before we start then, we have some committee membership news. I'd firstly like to thank Karen Mullen for her work on the committee, particularly for putting her experience in the community issues such as housing and welfare to good use. So we'll miss Karen and wish her all the very best on whatever her endeavours ahead. And also a big thank you to Sinead Innes for her work on the committee. Sinead was very thorough when it came to scrutinising the licensing bill, and also she had a particular interest in sport, so we'll miss her knowledge in sport as well. So I also want to wish Sinead well, whichever committee she's gone on to. And can I also welcome then Sinead's replacement, which is Anya Murphy. Anya, you join us at a very busy time. We have a few bills in the process, so I look forward to working along with you as well. And you're very welcome to the committee. So our members agreed that we write to Karen and Sinead to thank them both for the work they've done in the committee, yes?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Okay, members, we'll move on then. I've been requested by... Yes, sorry. Sorry, go ahead.
Just to inform you, I'm going to be getting moved off committee as well, so just to inform you that.
Okay, Alex, thank you very much, and we've enjoyed also having you on committee with us too.
Thank you. Bye.
Member, I've been requested by Engagement to remind members about the Pensioners' Parliament happening tomorrow, as the Minister for Communities is taking part. The format is based on a question time type event, and this year's questions are based on the lived experience survey which HNI conducted over the summer, so it's just to make you aware of that. I'll move on then to agenda item 3, which is the draft minutes. You'll find the draft minutes of the 9th of September 2021 at page 6 of your meeting pack. Can I ask are members content to agree the minutes as drafted?
Agreed.
Agreed, thank you. Move on then to agenda item 4, which is matters arising. Members have been provided at page 19 with the departmental correspondence in relation to the transfer of functions order regarding the transfer of the appeal service from Department for Communities to the Department of Justice, and at page 21 with the related letter from the Committee for the Executive Office. The appeal service provides administrative support for a number of tribunals which fall within the statutory responsibility of DSE, mainly concerned with appeals against decisions in relation to benefit entitlements. The history of this matter is that in November 2010 the Executive agreed to the transfer of responsibility for these tribunals to be the Department of Justice to underpin the independence of the appeal tribunals by removing them from the day-to-day control of the departments which make the decisions. In 2012 it was agreed to postpone the statutory transfer of the appeal service to allow time for the impact of welfare reform to be assessed. A service level agreement has been in place under which administrative responsibility for the appeal service is managed by the Northern Ireland Courts and Tribunal Service. It is now considered that both departments are in the position to facilitate the statutory transfer on the 1st of April 22. I know Kelly, you had your hand up. Do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, obviously with the appeal service moving, that means that some of the recommendations that Marie Kavanagh had brought forward with the independent review of PIP, we won't have jurisdiction over scrutinising that, but I'm just wondering if we could write perhaps to the Department of Justice to ask that when the appeals service is considering where they're holding their appeals, that they're not within the court setting, and perhaps we should highlight then to the Committee for Justice that there are, and maybe highlight to them the Marie Kavanagh report when they're doing the scrutiny of the appeals service then, because it's moving away from us.
No, I think that's a good idea, just to pass on our knowledge of evidence gathering we've had in the past. No, I'm happy enough with that. Any other members want to make any comment on that, or we'll move on? Okay, we'll move on then.
Sorry, Paula.
Sorry, go ahead.
Could you just read out the bit under there?
Okay, yeah.
Thanks. Yeah.
So I just then have to ask, are members content for the department to make the consequential amendments to consolidate the relevant subordinate legislation? Okay, members agreed?
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, members, at last week's meeting, the committee agreed to write to the Department for the Economy to raise concerns over the application for the High Street voucher scheme. The clerk held back that letter when it became clear that an announcement on the process was imminent. The Economy Minister has now announced the application process for the spent local card. Whilst an online portal does exist for applicants, those who are unable to use the online system will be able to avail of a telephone service. I know, Mark, you had brought this up last week as well. Are you content with that, or do you still wish for us to write to the Economy Minister?
Well, I think there's still merit in doing that letter. It's what to the Economy Minister and to the Communities Minister. Chair, could there be a bit of work done between the departments to look at what data and information they have, particularly for vulnerable people, that might facilitate or enable automatic payment? It's grand saying, oh, there's a phone line. How many phone lines are there? How well will that be staffed? Are we saying, oh, it's okay, pensioners will be able, they have all day to sit on the phone? Because you can imagine there'll be a lot of people trying to get through. We know the frustration that people have had with various phone lines in the past, and they're not, like, be it about tax credits or even winter fuel payments very recently.
No, okay, that's fair enough, Mark. We'll do that, not a problem. Kelly?
I think there's one piece of clarification. I appreciate the fact that the Economy Minister has said that if people can't do it online, they can use a telephone service or someone else can do it for them, but it's still not clear that someone else, how many people that they can do it for. So if you can imagine in respite care or residential care, how many people will be allowed, say for instance, somebody comes into a constituency office looking for our help, how many people we can even process. So it would be just good to have that clarification as well. When someone else is nominated to apply online for someone, how many can they actually put forward?
Yeah, because I thought that myself, because our constituency offices will be inundated with calls around this, I've no doubt. So that would be good to know, because many people don't have an email address even, so that we would be emailing from our office. Andy?
Yeah, Chair, I know obviously operationally the department will be working proactively behind the scenes to bring things together, but I have a degree of concern as to the length of time the telephone line will be available. Applications are open on the 27th of September, but the telephone line won't be available till the 11th of October. All applications then closed on the 25th of October. If we could maybe just emphasise to the department, if there is the possibility of bringing that date forward, it would be encouraged.
Yeah, that's about a 2-week window then,
Yeah.
for telephone applications. Okay, no, we can do that. All right, members agreed? Move on? Yeah, okay. We're going to move on then to agenda item 5, which is Charity Commission NI briefing on the Charities Bill. Members, before we start the briefing, we've been provided, starting at page 32, with requests, if I can speak this morning, we'll be all right, with requests from individuals to brief the committee on the bill. I propose we discuss these further during our closed session at the end of the meeting, when we will discuss our forward work programme on bills. Remember to agree with that, yeah?
Agreed. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Okay, members, you've been provided with a copy of the briefing paper from the Charity Commission at page 103, and the raised paper bill for ongoing reference is at 116. Can I welcome then Frances McCandless and Nicole Lappin to the meeting? Those are both very welcome today.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning. I think it's Frances. Is it yourself that you're going to kick off?
It's Nicole who will kick off.
Nicole, why on earth do you get this wrong every week? Okay, Nicole, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And by way of introduction, just good morning, members. My name is Nicole Lappin, and as you can see, I am joined here today by the Commission's Chief Executive, Frances McCandless. We are very grateful to the committee for the opportunity to provide a briefing on the draft bill, and I understand you have just referred, Chair, to the written briefing which you have been supplied with in advance of the meeting. So very briefly, I just want to make a few observations in my role as Chief Commissioner before I hand over to the Chief Executive, who will take members through the detail of the bill. Chair, I was appointed in August 2019, and at the outset, I want to say I am very grateful for the clarification provided by the Court of Appeal in February 2020 in the McKee and others case. The clarification I'm referring, of course, to is the fact that the Charities Act Northern Ireland 2008 does not give commissioners the power to delegate their decision-making functions to staff. This decision crystallised a seismic shift in terms of workload and responsibility from Commission staff to commissioners. The Commission had the benefit of a short period from the High Court decision in May 2019 to implement a new way of working to reduce any risk from the decision which the Court of Appeal took regarding who under the legislation had the lawful right to exercise the statutory powers. At this point, as Chief Commissioner, I would like to pay tribute to the staff and to my commissioners for the manner in which they have stepped up to the plate to ensure that regulation of the charity sector has continued despite the very real challenges which were presented by that decision. I'm also grateful to the Minister for Communities and to her department for bringing forward this bill, which you are scrutinising, which will address those challenges. The Commission welcomes the bill, and I will now, subject to you, Chair, hand over to Francis, who will now speak in more detail about the bill and its contents.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We're very glad to be here this morning. I'll take you briefly through the Commission's position. And when I refer to the Charities Act throughout, I'm going to be referring to the Charities Act NI 2008 as amended. And so, as you're all aware, in February 2020, we had a Court of Appeal decision which upheld a previous High Court decision from May 2019, which confirmed the position that Nicole has just set out about decision-making within the Commission. I suppose just to say initially that I raised the issue of delegation with the Department, which was in the Department for Social Development some 10 years ago. Legal advice was taken and there was a settled position that delegation did exist within the Act as it then stood by virtue of its reference to the Interpretation Act. The courts had clarified that that's not actually the position, but the Commission had designed all of its decision-making processes based on that position. So this obviously caused a lot of anxiety for charities, not least coming as it did immediately before the start of a pandemic. And so we sought at that stage to reassure charities that they were still charities in law, regardless of the legal status of any registration decision, and that they could continue to operate. And it appears to us that many charities did continue to do extraordinary work throughout that period, in the knowledge that they were indeed charitable. What we put in place at that point was an interim solution because we were waiting to see if a bill like this would come forward. So before turning all of our integrated systems inside out with public money, we wanted to wait and see what the permanent solution is going to be. So we have an interim decision-making solution in place, which takes decisions to a committee of commissioners convened under Schedule 1 of the Act. But we will, if this bill passes, obviously undertake a permanent redesign of many of our decision-making processes. So what were possibly much slower decision-making processes than charities already wanted, because our resourcing constraints have always meant that we couldn't register or process as many charities as we would have liked every year, have slowed down because decisions are now going to a committee of commissioners, but we would hope to speed that back up again on foot with this bill once we have certainty. If you will, then I'll just take you through clause by clause. And so moving to clause 1, actions of Commission staff treated as Commission actions. This clause is especially welcome as it effectively reinstates the register of charities. And that will be very important for charities, for their funders, for the public, and to all those organisations that work alongside charities. It also covers a range of consents given to charities, many of which will have been the basis for charities to take other actions about which they currently have very little legal certainty. So those consents might have covered permissions to carry out transactions with land or with any of their property. They may have allowed changes in the governing document of a charity, and so it will be extremely welcome that charities gain certainty on the status of those Commission decisions upon which they may have taken further actions. The safeguards within the bill do really ensure that additional strain won't be placed on charities when these decisions are reinstated. In the circumstances we're deeming as restricted or excluded, we recognise that there are certain kinds of decisions that do have human rights impacts, and so those have been set out in Clause 1.5 of the bill, and they've been excluded. Now, I can't pretend this won't cause complexities for the Commission, because those decisions will remain unlawful in perpetuity. This affects around 250 decisions. I suppose we consider it likely that any appeals about those decisions may already have surfaced, since the position effectively hasn't changed since the Court of Appeal delivered its judgment in 2020. However, additional challenges may arise, and that would be one of the consequences for us. It's extremely helpful that the bill sets out in Clause 1.3 that it doesn't alter the outcome of already concluded court or tribunal proceedings, as that will provide genuine certainty for any charities that were engaged in those. And a small number of decisions were actually remade, were validated, if you like, by commissioners after we received the judgment, in order to allow charities to go on and do certain other things on foot of those decisions. And it's very helpful that Clause 1.6 confirms that those fresh decisions, as they're referred to, are also outside the scope of this bill. If we move on then to the refreshed appeal rights, we agree that it's appropriate that fresh appeal rights should attach to the decisions affected by this bill. We will work very closely with everyone we can, with the department, with bodies like NICFO, with other umbrella and helper groups within the charity sector, to get the message out there that these appeal rights exist once those decisions are reinstated. Our own IT systems will allow us directly to contact anyone who was previously registered by staff. We don't have such a direct contact to people whose decisions were, for example, refused, or to those who may be affected parties, so who aren't the charities themselves. But again, we'll work on getting a public message out there. And I suppose in terms of the 42-day time limit for appeals, our view on that would be that it creates an appropriate level playing field for those whose decisions are affected by this bill and for those whose decisions are not affected by this bill. So for charities that were registered subsequent to the Court of Appeal decision, or for charities who receive a decision from the Commission this week or next month, they have 42 days to appeal, and that will be exactly the same rights. And so there'll be no disadvantage to anyone there. In terms of our assessment, you'll appreciate that this is somewhat hard to judge, but we don't think there are likely to be a large number of new appeals, based basically on the thinking that if charities were unhappy in the first place, they would have appealed then. Some 72 Commission decisions have been challenged since our powers were brought into force in 2011, but the vast majority of those relate to a very, very small number of big statutory inquiries. And so of those 72, only 26 challenges to our decisions actually didn't relate to those statutory inquiries. So that's 26 decisions in 10 years. And of those, only 2 were registration decisions that ever made it into a tribunal, and they were both upheld. So you'll see that the numbers aren't big in terms of previous challenges, and we would anticipate that that will continue. A very, very important provision within this bill is the disapplication of accounting reporting requirements during the, if we call it the gap period. The Court of Appeal judgment in February 2020 had a very significant impact on the annual reporting regime, and that's one of the main vehicles for transparency for the public in this Act, where charities supply us with accounts and reports every year. The inclusion of a section in the bill relating to the disapplication of accounting reporting requirements is a really important safeguard that protects charity trustees, because the effect would otherwise have been, in conjunction with the existing text in the Charities Act, that an offence would have been created. It's an offence for trustees not to comply with the annual reporting requirements, so it's extremely important that these requirements have been disapplied for those gap years. And for the majority of charities, if the financial year ends in March, that will affect the financial years ending in March 2020, 21 and 22. The bill introduces a requirement to begin complying again with the accounting and reporting requirements for financial years beginning on or after the 1st of April 2022. And again, this is a really helpful date to have in the bill because charity trustees need certainty in advance of a financial year beginning about whether they're going to have to report on that financial year because they have to account in a certain way and they have to gather certain information. This will enable us, if this legislation goes through the Assembly, to begin to communicate with trustees about what their obligations are going to be, and the date of royal assent becomes slightly less important in that regard because they have certainty that it will at least be the 1st of April 2022. Just to give the committee a sense then of what the size of that gap period, if you like, is going to be, it's likely to be about 3 years, and we won't start receiving any accounts and reports that aren't submitted voluntarily until around January 2024. So we could have 3 financial years unaccounted for on the public register of charities. But the good news here, and I think it's really important that you're aware of this, is the extraordinary work charities have been doing in the interim, continuing with transparency. So around about 2/3 of charities have been continuing to submit their annual reports and accounts voluntarily, and they're on our website. I think that's extraordinary because our system automatically reminds charities 3 times a year in the 10 months that they have to submit those accounts after the end of the financial year that they're going to be due. We've switched those reminders off because obviously there's no legal obligation to provide that information, and charities have been doing it anyway. They've been encouraged by NICFA and other bodies and by the department and by us, and they've kept doing it, and I think that shows really, really good compliant habits and a willingness on the part of charities to keep complying with the legislation and to be transparent for the public. We welcome the certainty of that date of the 1st of April, not least because charities that provide a certain kind of accounts to us as required by the regulations under the bill, under the Charities Act, charities which provide accruals accounts under the Statement of Recommended Practice, the charity SORP, have to provide comparative year figures, so they really do need to know in advance. Now, we think it's highly unlikely that if they were already preparing accruals accounts that they would have stopped in the interim period. For one thing, if they're a company charity, they're required by company legislation to prepare accruals accounts, and the vast majority of those wouldn't have changed their accounting format in the interim, but it is just an issue to be aware of, and that date helps with that and gives some certainty. Obviously, this creates a somewhat complex double scenario situation because there's one set of rules which will apply to charities affected by this bill, and there's one set of rules that applies to charities that were subsequently registered by commissioners in the Schedule 1 committee. So we're going to have to draft new guidance to try and walk charity trustees through their responsibilities without creating too much confusion. And I think we'll also want to do a bit of public awareness to reassure the public that transparency continues and that regulation continues. I suppose we've never really had the resources to. We look with envy at our colleagues in Ireland, for example. We hear their campaigns on the radio. We've never really been able to do that because we're very small, but we're going to have to really make an effort to try and get messages out there to reassure the public and to help charities understand what they're meant to be doing. We'll also have to change our IT systems. I suppose that goes without saying, since all of the submission of accounts and reports is actually online. If I move on to Clause 2 then, we really welcome the provisions in Clause 2 for delegating certain decisions to staff. And just to give the committee a sense of the balance of the kinds of decisions that the Commission makes, if we took the period up to the Court of Appeal decision, regardless of who the decision maker was, if the delegation set out in Section 9A of the bill had been in operation, staff would have made around 98.5% of the decisions, and commissioners or those operating in a Schedule 1 committee, which can be both staff and commissioners, would have made 1.5% of the decisions. So that gives you a sense of what the mix of decisions within the Commission is. We welcome that the bill actually does clarify, which clarifies our original understanding that staff can act as part of a decision-making committee under Schedule 1 of the Charities Act. And also, the Court of Appeal judgment itself very helpfully clarified what the role of staff is when they're not acting as decision makers, and I note that this came up at last week's committee discussion. What do staff do if they're not making decisions? And the judgment of the Court of Appeal sets out that the role of staff is one of, and I'm quoting here, research, information gathering, briefing, advice, and recommendation. So I think that helpfully clarifies that if staff are not acting as decision makers, those are the roles that they can perform in support of decision makers. Any scheme of delegation obviously is to be consulted upon, and decision-making processes which are not to be delegated will have to be permanently rewritten, manuals will have to be rewritten, information technology systems will have to be changed, and staff will have to be trained. And what we would hope to move back to then is a much more streamlined and efficient process for making decisions like the ones we previously had, which are very IT dependent. And obviously there are resource implications for that. I'll talk a bit more about that at the end. There are also implications for the future recruitment, remuneration and induction of commissioners, because they would have a slightly different job permanently going forward. If we move on to clause 3 then, this would insert new sections which provide a power to introduce a registration threshold through regulations at a future point. And we know that the current independent review of charity regulation established by the Minister is looking at this issue, so we would anticipate that there would be a large consultation on this in future if it were going to be introduced. The Commission is neutral on this point. I mean, as a delivery body, we will obviously implement whatever legislation we're given by the Assembly and the Minister. I've set out some implications of what various sizes of threshold would be for regulation in the statistical annex to our submission, but just briefly, if there were to be a £5,000 income threshold, that would take about 1/3 of charities out of regulation based on those that are already registered, if we take those as a representative sample of the charity population. So a 5k threshold would take out around 1/3 of charities from regulation, and a £20,000 income threshold would take out over half of charities in Northern Ireland from regulation, because the sector tends to be smaller charities. So we do, however, welcome the inclusion in the bill of the assets of a charity along with its income being taken into consideration, because, and I've given one example here, there is a charity currently on the register whose income is £17,000, but its assets are 1.3 million. And obviously one of the principles that underlies regulation is that charities are entitled to a range of tax exemptions funded by the public purse, and regulation is in some ways a quid pro quo for that, and transparency around the wealth of charities is included in the legislation, and that wealth lies not just in income. Obviously there would be resource implications for the Commission in introducing a threshold for registration, and we would explore that in future. There'd be questions around whether charities could bounce on and off the register as their income went up and down, or if they chose to, we'd have to rewrite all of our guidance. The guidance relating to registration and annual reporting amounts to some 40 pieces of guidance, because we work really hard to try and help charities through these complex pieces of legislation. But as I say, we would anticipate the Department holding a thorough consultation where this sort of change to be introduced in future. Just briefly then, if you will, I'll touch on resource implications. I've already mentioned that the sections of this bill would include significant information technology redesign of the Commission's systems, redesign and permanent changes to our decision-making processes and the manuals for staff that underlie those, and the guidance for charities and the public that sits on top of those. We would have to train staff, we would have to deal with any new UPs that arose as a result of this bill, and we have some very challenging communication messages to try to get across to charities and the public. We're very small. We've got 28 permanent staff posts, and our permanent baseline budget is 1.6 million, although we've luckily had an uplift temporarily in recent years, which is ending this year. So public money is tight, we know that, and if no additional money can be made available, we will obviously have to reduce what we do in other areas of our work, such as registrations and casework decisions and investigations and inquiries, so that the same small number of people can turn their minds to making the changes that would be required by this bill. So, Chair, I'll leave it there, and I'll obviously take any questions.
That's great. Thank you, Frances. Thank you, Nicole. I just have a few questions for you, and they're mainly based on some of the responses that we have had. We're starting to go through our evidence gathering. So the first one is, some of the responses had said that they had felt that there could be other options when it came to clause 1 as drafted, and so I suppose the question around that, do you feel that clause 1 as drafted is really the only option there? Secondly, then in clause 2 and the delegating certain decisions to Commission staff, and you talked there a little bit about what roles staff had within the Commission. We'd received evidence indicating that it is the commissioners and not necessarily the staff who are recruited with the detailed knowledge of charity law and operation, and therefore those that would query staff making some of those decisions. So it's just your view on that as well. And then finally, we are then the independent review is ongoing and will overlap with some aspects of this bill. Do you think that raises any cause for concern at this stage as well?
Nicole, if you're content, I'll pick up on those questions. Thank you, Chair. Clause 1 as drafted looks sensible to us. I mean, I think there's a clear rationale for the decisions which are, if you like, carved out, being those which may affect individuals as opposed to charities as bodies, as institutions per se. So, I mean, this was a decision of the Department and the Minister. It was not a decision of the Commission which clauses were introduced, but we can absolutely see the clear rationale for those being the decisions which are restricted or excluded from the scope of the bill. In terms of Clause 2, the staff are very experienced and well trained and very well able to make these kinds of decisions. They are recruited to a specific job specification relating to the kind of decision-making role that they perform. And like staff in all the other charity regulators on these islands, both in the United Kingdom and in Ireland, staff do perform decision-making functions in all of those other regulators. That's the norm. And so our staff are every bit as capable of making any decisions that the legislature wishes them to make as they would be in other commissions. In terms of the overlap on Clause 3, I mean, obviously the independent review is looking at this in great detail. So I suppose these two things could hopefully run in conjunction, because we don't know what the recommendations are going to be. I know they're going to come and present to you, but they're looking at this in a great deal of detail. And if they were to recommend no threshold, but the legislation went through making a provision for a threshold, you can see where the complexity would be. But I suppose hopefully the timing of this will work.
Yeah, we're hoping that the timing of that will work for us also before we do our report, because we wouldn't want the review to cause any major problems with any of the decisions that we make here and any of the legislation that we put forward. And I have no doubt that we will have you and you both back in again at stages throughout our evidence gathering. I'm going to open up to the floor. I've only got one person who's indicated that they want to ask anything at this stage, so could I just remind members if they want to put their hands up? Kelly, go ahead.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Nicole and Francis. This has been a long, drawn-out process, and I'm glad to see that we have something on page, the draft legislation now. Francis, can I just ask you a couple of questions? And Nicole, I've got one for you as well. Just to start off, Francis, you've mentioned about the Charity Commission. Well, and you've sort of answered one of my questions, so I'm going to turn it round. I was looking for information about how you would contact affected parties or let them know, or clarification about the changes that are coming in and so on. I'm just wondering, do you actually have enough resources available within the Commission to provide the public the clarity about appeals, about the date of the accounts, and do you actually have the resources for this new IT system? I'm very aware that this legislation will put additional resource implications on yourselves.
We always struggle for resources, Kelly, and I suppose we've got one communications person and one IT officer, and we have always struggled with being able to communicate with the public and with charities in the way that we would really like. And also, I mean, obviously all of this is to do with prioritisation, but do I take money away from doing more registrations, put it into more communication? These are the same kinds of choices that every public body has to make. I think we will be able to cope with the capital elements of the IT changes because we already have a transformation project ongoing, which our sponsor department has agreed. The problem is that the IT is the last bit of the jigsaw, if you like. We actually have to design the decision-making systems that the IT will deliver. And it's that process of turning the staff away from making the decisions to designing the new ways of making the decisions that is really going to eat into our resources.
And just to check on that then, how many charities are currently awaiting registration? How many's on the waiting list at the moment?
There are around, I think to the best of my recollection, about 2,500 charities that we're aware of. There's a list on our website called the Combined List, and that shows all of those that have submitted an expression of intent to register, so that will be the main bulk of the waiting list. But then there are also others on that we know need to register, either because they've ignored our calls to come forward to register in the past, or because our contact details for them were out of date and we couldn't contact them any other way, but they were deemed as charities under a previous deeming provision because they were registered with HMRC. So that combined list on our website sets out, I would need to confirm the number for you, but that combined list on our website sets out all those different categories of charities who are waiting to be registered, if you like, whether they want to or not.
Yeah, and part of that sort of public sort of awareness will need then to go to funders within Northern Ireland or even beyond Northern Ireland to assure them that when they are making decisions about applications for funding for a charity that's on the waiting list, that they are, you know, the charities may well still be registered with the Companies House. I just want to move on then, I want to seek actually your opinion on this, Francis. 1.8, when we talk about that length of appeal, the 42 days to file an appeal, in your experience of previous appeals that have come forward, what has been the average length of time that charities take to file an appeal? Is 42 days way over the amount, or, you know, do they struggle? Would they struggle to meet the 42 days?
I suppose they don't seem to have struggled in the past, Kelly, and where they have, the tribunal has taken a very, sympathetic approach to the fact that charities may have a good reason for bringing an appeal out of time, and the tribunal can hear an appeal out of time. What tends to happen, particularly in things like a registration where the charity receives a decision directly, they know immediately whether they're happy with it or not, and a lot of those would tend to go in fairly promptly to the tribunal as an appeal. The paperwork's fairly straightforward to fill in and to send in to the tribunal. Others, there are categories of appellants who are called affected parties, so they may be members of a charity, so they may not be the people who initially receive our decision in a letter or in an email. And if they have good cause, they can go to the tribunal and say, you know, even though it may have been published on our website, they may have had no reason to go looking for it. They can go to a tribunal and say, I only became aware of this decision on this date. This is why I think it affects me. Will you still hear my appeal out of time? And the tribunal has the jurisdiction to agree to that. So I do think there are mechanisms and safeguards within the tribunal process itself, which allows the tribunal to look at appeals that are brought beyond the 42 days if they think there's a reason.
I'm just worried about the wording in 1.8a where it says under Rule 17.1 those must be filed within 42 days. So from the law that we're bringing forward, it says that they must do it. So I'm just wondering if that may have a future impact on the appeals process. Let me see. Clause 3. Given the fact that the independent review, and we don't know when that's going to report upon and how it's going to impact this legislation, the whole of Clause 3 could be an amendment in the future. Would you have concern if Clause 3 wasn't there, or would you prefer it goes through at this stage and is amended at a later date? It just holds back a lot of, you know, those if we did take the decision that it was a threshold of 5,000 or 20,000, it holds back that decision until such times as the independent review comes forward. You know, do you think it would be worthwhile to wait and put that whole Clause 3 in as an amendment as a future date?
I think the Commission is entirely neutral on Clause 3, to be honest, Kelly. I mean, we'll take what we're given. It's not something that we have any view on, whether it's legislated for now or later. Okay. Is really a matter for the Committee and the Minister and the Department. Okay. Could I just correct myself? One of my colleagues has very helpfully, this is the beauty of being not sitting in front of you in the room, told me that there are actually 3,900 on that combined list waiting to register, so apologies, I slightly underestimated.
No, by the power of the internet, thank you very much for that. Last one then, I have a question for Nicole. Nicole, as a Commissioner, obviously there are certain decisions that you have to make directly, and you will, as Francis has kindly clarified, staff can provide guidance to commissioners through research and so on. I'm just wondering, is that taken as advice by commissioners? And I just want to ask the question, will commissioners ever disagree with the guidance, or is it guidance that they're getting provided by staff, or is it just research? How do you see that working forward, Nicole?
So Kelly, that's a really interesting question. At the minute, the way it works is staff come to a panel of 3 commissioners with recommendations. So they have carried out the research, they have looked at what the law would suggest the outcome might be. But what I can tell you from my role is that the commissioners do not always agree with those recommendations. So it is not simply a rubber stamping decision-making panel that we have. The commissioners, in my experience, have been very diligent in reading the papers. The papers are often very copious. For these panels, we can have maybe up to 1,000 pages presented to us to prepare for the decision making that we have to take. But what the commissioners do is they will listen to the recommendations, they will discuss it as a panel, they will ask a lot of questions often, and I have been on panels where we have refused to go with the recommendation made. I would expect that to continue going forward because I think that is good decision making, especially under the bill, the types of decisions, and Francis touched on this, that it is envisaged where we will not be able to delegate our powers to staff, are those decisions which will either impact on the reputation of the Commission or which may potentially be controversial.
No, I completely understand that. I think this is where that clarity, I suppose having been in a councillor, for instance, would be my example of it, where staff would provide us with information, but ultimately it would be, yourselves or a councillor would take the decision, and it's up to them to carry that responsibility. No, that's a bit of clarification for me. Absolutely appreciate that everybody is professional in their organisation and has a job of work to do. And at the end of the day, it's your own personal reputation that calls into question if a decision was just, knocked through. So that's not what we want to happen. But I think that's me so far, Chair. There's a lot to go on with this, guys. Thank you very much for your patience with my questions. Thank you.
Okay, Kelly, nobody else? Oh, sorry, Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, just one question, Chair, at this stage, and I'm looking forward to hearing all the evidence as it comes through, and there may be more questions that come out from that. Just further to Kelly's point in relation to clause 118, and obviously on the proviso that this legislation is approved and receives royal assent, would it be the intention of the Commission or the Department otherwise, have they conveyed to yourselves the intention to contact all persons and charities that would be affected by the refreshed appeal rights?
Thanks for that question, Andy. We wouldn't know who all of those people were in order to be able to contact them directly. We will be able to contact directly all the charities that were affected by registration decisions, that is, decisions to register. We will try and contact all of those whose registrations we refused, although of course we won't have necessarily up-to-date contact details for them because those are through the register as time goes on. The persons who are affected could be members of a charity, for example. So if a charity asks for consent to change its objects, if it's a company charity and it wants to change certain parts of its objects, it has to come to us for consent. The members of the charity may have views about that decision, but we would have absolutely no way of knowing who all those people were. So that's where I think the public information campaign aspect would come in, and we'll work very hard with the department and with other bodies just to try and get that message out there.
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Andy, thank you. No other members wanting to ask any questions at this stage? Look, thank you very much, Francis and Nicole. As I said earlier, we may need to get you back. In fact, I think we probably will need to get you back as more questions arise as we go through the evidence. So thank you for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, bye-bye. Okay, members, we're going
Chair, could I just ask that we sort of make a note that I'm a wee bit concerned, the Charity Commission, as like all organisations, receives a certain level of funding, and I think we as a committee, we will be keen to see that they do have a public message. I just have a concern that if they don't receive enough funding to do so, it would be quite a limited amount. So I don't know in our future report if we could mark it to think about, for the report, a request to the Department for Communities to ensure that funding is made available for that public communication to go out, because as Andy has found out through his question, this is not just charities that we know who the names and addresses are, these are individuals too, so the public will need to know that. Yeah.
No, it's certainly, and I mean, that could arise as we go through as well through the evidence gathering, but certainly the clerk will make a note of that. Okay, members, happy enough, we move on to our next witness session. So if we move on then to agenda item 6, which is Scottish Charity Regulator briefing on the Charities Bill again. You'll find this at page 143 of your meeting pack. And then can I welcome Martin Tyson to our meeting this morning. Martin, you're very welcome. If you would like to go ahead and brief the committee.
Thanks very much. Good morning. I'm Martin Tyson, and I am the Head of Regulation and Improvement for OSCA. So what I do is I look after our casework and also our engagement with the sector and with other stakeholders. And just a bit of background about OSCA and the sort of scale of things in Scotland. We started operations in 2006. Our legislation, which is the Charities and Trustee Investment Scotland Act 2005, kicked in then. We're based in Dundee. We have around 50 staff, and we have a board of 6 who are appointed through the public appointments process in Scotland. We regulate 25,000 charities. And it's a universal system of regulation, so essentially you can't be a charity in Scotland unless you're registered with us. A few characteristics about the sector in Scotland. It's predominantly made up of small charities, so 51% of the charities on the register have incomes of less than £25,000 a year. 66% of charities on the register have no paid staff. And 43% of charities on the register are unincorporated. So that's a background to the sector in Scotland. I've in the submission that I've put in, I've tried to cover, I suppose, the equivalent points in our legislation and our regulatory setup that. Maybe speak to the key parts in your bill that's going through, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have on those.
No, look, thank you, Martin. I suppose I just want to go back to the point that you'd made there about the amount of smaller charities over in Scotland, and just about our proposals here. For exempting charities from registering altogether. What's your views on that and how that would operate? Because I certainly am looking at how the model is run in Scotland, and it seems like a more sensible approach. Just what's your views on how we're going forward?
I suppose I probably don't know enough about the charity sector in Northern Ireland to comment directly on that. In terms of how it operates in Scotland, I think that there's been a consensus right through since before the passage of the 2005 Act that there should be kind of universal registration. There shouldn't be any exceptions or exemptions. And I think that is the view across the sector. It's certainly the view across the public, and it's not been particularly challenged in Parliament either. I think that's from the point of view of clarity. So if you can't be a charity in Scotland unless you're registered, it's very clear to people what's a charity and what isn't. And for instance, we have a power where an organisation is holding itself out to be a charity but isn't. We have the power to stop them doing that, to direct them not to do that. And we do get, receive every year a number of concerns about that. So there's that clarity there. I think there's also people value the transparency because members of the public, funders, stakeholders, government, local government, whoever has to transact with charities can look at our register, get a set of basic information, including in a lot of cases a look at the charity's accounts, and that gives a sense of transparency and encourages trust in the sector. The Scottish Government at the beginning of this year consulted on some proposals actually to increase the level of transparency, to give us powers to make it easy for us to publish the accounts, including for smaller charities, and to get more details of charity trustees. And broadly speaking, there was particularly on the publication of accounts, there was a lot of broad support for that. I think that there is a real sort of value that people attach to transparency. And I think that goes for the charities themselves. The ability to display a charity number and show that you are regulated it helps build trust.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you on that. Just an interesting point you'd made there about where you've had those discussions with some that have come forward to register as a charity, and you've dissuaded them or pushed them in a different direction, because we've had issues around that in the past with some of the people in the past here with decision making with our charity commission. It's just what sort of example would that be, or just if you could just expand on that, what that means.
Are you talking about our role in terms of registering or not registering charities?
Yeah, register. Well, you'd said there about when someone goes to register as a charity, that might not be the way forward for that organisation, is that what you meant by that, or did I pick that up wrong?
What I was talking about earlier was the situation where an organisation is saying that it's a charity without being registered with us. Okay. That in that case, we can direct them to not call themselves a charity because they aren't until they're registered with us. So that's more of a disciplinary power. In terms of our contact with organisations that want to become charities, obviously we've got a lot of guidance on our website. We have a lot of interactions with bodies that want to apply for status, and we will help advise them about the process. I think that in a lot of cases what we'll do is signpost them to what are called the third sector interfaces, which are bodies that are funded by Scottish Government to advise the voluntary sector. And a lot of cases there will be advice provided there about whether becoming a charity, whether you're getting registered, is the most appropriate thing for that organisation. That's not necessarily something we can do because we have a regulatory decision to make there, and that can sometimes conflict with the sort of guidance and advisory role.
Oh, look, thank you for that. Kelly, you wanted to ask a question?
Yes, thank you very much, Martin. I just wanted to sort of pick your brains on this one, really. You've mentioned that there's a significant number of charities whose turnover is under 25,000 per year in Scotland. As far as Oscar's concerned, do you make a difference in the reporting mechanism that those smaller charities have to have compared to larger charities?
We do. So it comes in two ways. I mean, there's two things. There's two, if you like. There's one big contact that every charity has with us every year, and that is completing their annual return. And along with that, they send us their annual trustee report and accounts. So sort of both aspects of that, there's some sort of graduation there. So depending on the way the charity is set up and depending on its income, there will be a lesser or a greater degree of financial reporting. So the big kind of cut off there is between doing receipts and payment accounts and fully accrued accounts, which are much more complex. And so there's a threshold there. In terms of the annual report that they complete for us, which is almost always done online now, if you, at the beginning of the process, tell us that you have quite a small income, there are questions that you just won't be asked, so that the annual return will be a lot more lightweight for you as a smaller charity.
I was just wondering about that because I know that we might consider a threshold for a charity could be registered, but in actual fact, I actually think that at this stage, just through our investigations, that having all charities the ability to have a charity number and to be recognised as such is very important to those charities. If they're volunteer-led or they don't have any paid staff and they have very little money coming in, but their purposes are still charitable, that it's important that they have that umbrella, sort of protection. But I just wondered, quite often we would hear complaints from those organisations that the amount of red tape and paperwork that they have to go through equates to a much larger charity. So I suppose a threshold may well just apply to the paperwork and the reporting mechanisms as opposed to who becomes registered.
Yeah, definitely. We take that approach in terms of the reporting and as you say, the paperwork. I think the other side of it is our Act requires us to act as a proportionate regulator and to adopt an approach that targets our attention to where it's required. And I think that's the other side in operation. It's making sure that the sort of interventions that you make where there's an issue with a smaller charity are proportionate to the issues involved and proportionate, and are appropriate to the context that it's operating in. So that doesn't mean that where, for instance, an issue arises or we get a complaint about a smaller charity, that doesn't mean we don't take it seriously. But sometimes the action that we'll take will need to take into account the fact that the trustees will be operating on their own. They won't have the level of advice and support that a larger charity would have, and we need to take that into account.
And just my very final question is just to ask you, Martin, we have situations where there are obviously charitable bodies that are registered with charities, but impact on decisions made, for instance, by a charity regulator, could have an impact on an individual. Do you do that with Scotland? How does that work there, or is that out with your remit?
Our decisions mostly, in terms of individuals, mostly relate to the charity trustees.
Yeah.
So our key powers there are to suspend a charity trustee, which we can do for a period of up to 6 months. If we want to take more permanent action from that, for instance, disqualification, whether that's permanent or for a period of time, we have to go to the Court of Session in Edinburgh to do that. So it's the Court of Session that makes the decision on that sort of permanent disqualification, which has the particular impact on someone. The other decision that we would make would be where a person is disqualified, they can ask for a waiver of that disqualification, and we make a decision on that. All of those decisions, well, the disqualification, that's a decision for the court. It can be challenged in court, and the person has their ability to challenge that in court. The other decisions, the suspension and the waiver, those are decisions which are subject to an internal review procedure, so that if the person doesn't like our decision, they can ask us to review it internally. If they don't like that decision, they can go to the independent tribunal and eventually to the courts.
Okay, oh, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Martin. Keep up the good work in Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Andy?
Yeah, not a question, Chair, just more a request, Martin, if at all possible, in terms of the point that Kelly was making regarding reporting requirements for larger and smaller charities, would it be at all possible for you to send us a copy of the questions that would be asked of each for us to see, just for visualisation?
Yes, I'll take that with my colleagues and get you a copy of that.
Thanks very much.
Good, thank you. Okay, no other member has indicated they want to ask anything further. Martin, can I thank you? Thank you for your brief paper, and also thank you for joining us today and answering our questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Okay, members, we're going to take a very short break just while we prepare for our next witness session. Okay.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29.
Okay, members, while we're waiting for our officials for our next agenda item, I'm going to move you on then to our tabled papers. And you'll find there the SL1, the Housing Benefit and Universal Credit Sanctuary Schemes Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2021. The proposed rule will amend the Housing Benefit Regulations Northern Ireland 2006 and the Universal Credit Regulations Northern Ireland 2016 to include an exception from under-occupancy deductions from any housing benefit or universal credit claiming who is living in a social sector rented property that is adapted under a sanctuary scheme as a result of a member of that household having had domestic violence threatened or inflicted upon them. Members, any comments, or are you content for the department to proceed to make this rule?
Content.
Okay, thank you very much. Then, where are we moving to now, Janice?
10 correspondence.
Okay, we'll move then to agenda item 10, correspondence. You'll find the correspondence memo at page 217 of your pack. I want to draw your attention to correspondence at page 408 from Carnegie UK regarding its reporting on the Embedding Wellbeing Project. Carnegie UK are requesting that the committee consider a motion in support of their recommendations on embedding wellbeing. Can I propose that we discuss this proposal by Carnegie in our closed work planning session? Are members in agreement with that?
Agreed.
Yeah, thank you. Members, yesterday you were emailed correspondence from the private office alerting you that Minister Hargey will launch a minor capital works programme for sport. Tomorrow the programme is called Building Better Sports Facilities and will be managed and administered by Sport NI. It is intended that the application process will be open for a period of 2 weeks. Members, any comments on that? Okay, Andy?
Do we have any further information as to what time it's launching so that we can promote it, given it's only going to be open for 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Okay, we can get that information. Yeah. Anything else, Kelly?
Andy was stealing my thunder. I was going to ask, is there any opportunity for this to be extended? If we can.
It's not a long time.
It's really not.
We can ask that as well, so we can. That's okay. Members, if anybody, anything else they want to bring up under correspondence at this stage?
No.
Nope. Okay, then I'll move you on to agenda item 11, which is the Forward Work Programme. You'll find a copy of the Forward Work Programme at page 410 of your packs, and can I propose that we discuss this in greater detail during our closed session as well?
Agreed.
Members happy enough with that? Okay, members, at this stage, is there any other business members want to highlight? Nope. Okay. Then I'll move on to agenda item 13, which is date, time, location of next meeting. Can I advise members our next meeting will take place on Thursday, the 23rd of September at 9 AM. Again, I'm afraid, folks, because we've just got so much to get through, so we're going to have to start at 9 again next week. And just to remind members, there is a closed session after we finish our briefings today because we have several things we need to go through. So just remind members of that. We're still waiting on, sorry, Andy, do you want to?
If we're still waiting on officials, I might indulge and bring up an AOB.
That's fine.
will recall that under the budget, the Minister was allocated $5 million to support charities and social enterprises.
Yep.
There's still very little information in relation to that. I'm just wondering if we could write to the department to see if we can extract any further information as to what that scheme will be, how the Minister intends to roll that out, and importantly when it will be rolled out.
Okay, no, absolutely. I'm happy enough we do that. Yeah. Members, any other things? We do have a little bit of time. Our officials are still not on the call. If there isn't anything else you want to discuss this week, we can go off again for a few minutes while we wait on the officials coming on. Kelly?
I was just going to say, perhaps, I know the department's going to give a briefing on its business plan, but we could be doing with an update on the social strategies that are due to come forward for December. Maybe if we could write to the department just to say to them, are they on track for that? Because they're going to hit us in the middle of us doing bills.
They are, and I think we'll discuss that as well later on. When we look at our forward work programme, we've got a pretty packed schedule going ahead, and then have the social strategies arrive with us just before Christmas recess. Will cause us even more of a heavier workload. Okay, there is, who's that? There's Linda has come on to the call. We're just waiting on Michael coming on. Go ahead, Andy.
Sure, just one final piece of AOB, and I appreciate obviously we're going to be really busy, therefore written's probably going to be preferable at this stage if we can get an update on the wider housing revitalisation programme.
Okay, we'll get a written briefing on that.
Sorry, Chair, one last thing. Have it down here.
You sure, Gag.
I know.
One last thing.
Disregard on the high street voucher. We know we were told that was being looked at, but it's never been put in writing. I think we need to make sure that the benefits aren't going to be impacted by the high street voucher.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so the disregard just what's happening with that, because, as I say, it's been indicated that the Minister had been working with the economy on that, but it's due to come out.
And we do know that a lot of the other COVID stuff that went out over the past year and a half, it
was disregarded.
Yeah, it was disregarded with benefits. No, that's fair enough. Okay, members, we have the departmental officials are now with us, so if I can then ask you to turn to agenda item 7, which is a briefing by officials on the departmental business plan. You'll find this at page 146 of your meeting pack. Then can I welcome Michael Kane and Linda Williams to the meeting. Thank you for coming along. I know you weren't due to be with us for about another half hour, but we're running slightly ahead. So thank you for answering those calls. So I'll just pass over to yourselves to brief the committee.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and good morning, Chair, and thank you very much, and no problem at all. So just good morning, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to brief the committee this morning with an update on the department's 5-year strategy and associated business plan from 2020 to 2022. So, Chair, as you've said, my name is Linda Williams. I'm Director of Governance and Commercial Services that has responsibility for oversight of the business plan and our strategy for the department, and I'm joined this morning with my colleague Michael Kane, who is head of our programme for government and our business planning team and sits within my directorate. So, members, we will be delivering this briefing to you today, and there'll be an opportunity to ask questions around any aspect of what we've provided to you that we may arise. So, I suppose by way of context, you're aware of the scale and ambition of the department's 5-year strategy. Our colleagues provided a briefing to yourselves in December 2020, Beverley Walls and Cairn Ward. I suppose Michael and I are here today to provide a further update on the DFC business plan and the developments of the plan over the past 9 months. This will include, the process for the development of the plan, the governance of the plan, including our monitoring and reporting progress, and indeed how the plan aligns to and supports our 5-year strategy, including things like our key achievements, and then I'm going to conclude this morning with our next steps. It was initially arranged, Chair, that we would have presented departmental officials would attend committee in February to explain the business plan and the associated business plan and process, but the department requested a deferral until after the budget was confirmed in April 2021. And it has concluded its prioritisation exercise on the draft budget settlement. We reassessed our business plan at that point, and the reassessment and update of the plan was carried out in June 2021. Firstly, I want to provide you the context and the background of the development of the departmental business plan from 2020 to 2022 and its alignment to our departmental's 5-year strategy. The Departmental Plan 2020 is the vehicle through which the Department's strategy is delivered and it's monitored, and all aspects of the business plan align to and support the DFC strategy. Each strategic objective in the strategy is supported by at least one business plan and activity, with the inclusions of milestones to monitor our progress. Like the strategy, the business plan is a living document. It has been designed to change and adapt over the period to meet our emerging needs, our challenges, and indeed our priorities. One of the key attributes, I think, and the things that we're most proud of in the plan in 2020 to 22 is the agility of the plan, and the activities to support the development of the strategic plan can be added to. They can be edited, removed through a carefully change control process. Any changes to the business plan activities and their supporting milestones are formally requested through my team for scrutiny and assurances purposes, and significant material changes, for example, to our strategic objectives, require a formal approval from our policy and our strategy subcommittee, which I've referenced in your briefing pack for today. In terms of the business plan, the plan was drafted through a series of workshops and ongoing engagements with departmental colleagues across our DFC 5 business grade 3 group business groupings. The business plan and activities and the milestones were developed through a consideration of our 4 strategic themes and our associated strategic objectives for the department. Upon, confirmation of the departmental's budget for 21-22, the senior team were asked to conduct a refresh of and inputs to our departmental plan. And I suppose this was to check that it was still affordable. It was also achievable, and it had an inclusion of realistic and challenging targets and timelines in light of that confirmed budget. The resulting refreshed departmental business plan was approved by the Departmental Management Board on the 30th of June 2021. And the business plan for 2020 to 22 was formally launched internally to our staff and through our internet on the 18th of August 2021. The departmental plan includes the key strategic activity for the department, and it's supported by our group and our directorate business plans. Activity is monitored at lower level plans, and it enables lower level plans to be escalated if requires visibility or scrutiny from our Departmental Management Board. And that's due to the high agile approach that we have adopted in the formation of this new plan. Over the past 9 months, we have also made a number of changes to our governance and our management arrangements for our business plan. And as per our briefing provided to committee, we have introduced a number of significant changes in relation to the business plan since the launch of our strategy in November, including our governance, our format, agility, and the use of technology to enhance not just our presentation of our plan, but also the analysis of our management information. So it's not just about focusing on what we're doing, but it's also how we're doing it and how effectively we're doing it. So following the 2018-2019 board effectiveness review of our departmental board, there was a number of recommendations made. 2 of those recommendations were to introduce 2 new subgroups. One was around a policy and strategy subgroup, and one was around our people and resources subgroup. And they were introduced to support our Departmental Management Board and the Permanent Secretary's oversight of those, particularly of the strategy and the associated business plans. The formal business plan reporting is produced in the first instance to our policy and our strategy subcommittee, and it's scrutinised on a quarterly basis and a quarterly position, and it provides assurances to the Departmental Management Board, and it flags any significant matters that require their attention, so anything that should be flagged to our senior management team to be dealt with. The format of the plan has changed and now reflects an outcome-based approach. This not only future-proofs our plan for alignment with the new programme for government when it's launched, but it's also consistent with the recommendations highlighted in the recent Northern Ireland Civil Service-wide review, the review of the departmental business plan, which was released in September 2020. The department, or DFC, was an early pioneer in the adoption and implementation of the recommendations in this review. In addition to the adoption of an outcomes-based approach, another key recommendation of the review was for the closer integration of business planning and the corporate risk management. The department has sought to implement this recommendation through the development of our new online reporting tool. A working group was established to oversee, a task and finish working group was established to oversee the implementation of the new tool, and it comprised colleagues from business planning, IT, risk management, and indeed our professional service unit. And they had a remit to develop a new online business planning and risk management portal to assist in our reporting and our monitoring process. And I'm delighted to say to your committee members today that portal became live at the end of March 2021. The key benefits of that new online tool have been really, really beneficial for the department, and they've been highlighted in your pack. They provide a much more streamlined approach in terms of capturing our data and our information around our business planning, our risks, and our programme for government activity. And it pulls together all of that information in one update and in one place. And whilst the tool is an example of innovation and collaboration, which we're very proud of within DFC, the department is really not resting on its laurels. The group plans that sit below our departmental plan are currently being enhanced to incorporate more metrics for the analysis of performances. And we are continuing to take feedback from all our stakeholders who use the tool. And it's resulted in further updates, for example, in April, May time this year. And we've made those updates to the system to make it much more user-friendly and more intuitive with what we're trying to achieve. And we'll continue to update the portal as the future progresses. As I've already outlined, the outline tool has been future-proofed to ensure business planning and activities align with our new programme for government. And once the new PFG framework is finalised and launched, we will link it to our plan. This will ensure that our business planning activities align to not just our departmental strategic objectives and PFG outcomes, but it'll also reduce inefficiencies and the burdens placed across, in terms of administration burdens across our areas, in commissioning what was traditionally multiple commissioning exercises. Promotion of our plan is key, and together with our DSC communications team, a schedule of communication activity has been developed, and to develop to a number of targeting audiences to coincide, I suppose, with the launch and the ongoing management of our 2020 to 22 business plan, and that includes our partners like our ALBs. The communication plan details when and how the departmental staff, its ALBs and our delivery partners indeed, will be provided on updates on our progress against plan. And examples of such progress include informally things like the departmental's digital channels, and also more formally forums such as the ALB forum, which meets regularly with our permanent secretary. In terms of achievements over the last 9 months, much has been achieved in terms of delivery against the plan. Members will appreciate that given the broad remit and the functions of our department, the department cannot deliver this alone or in isolation. Much of our success would not be achievable without the support and the partnership with our key delivery partners, including our arm's length bodies, our councils, our other government departments, our community and indeed our private sector. In terms of key achievements, I think the biggest key achievement, which will not come as a surprise to committee today, is the collective achievement of the department and its response to the COVID-19 pandemic, where we faced unprecedented demand for our services. And it's important to note that many of those key achievements, included in your briefing, were delivered as our staff had to adopt to new working conditions, including working from home and using new technologies, as well as they themselves facing many challenges presented around social distancing and indeed homeschooling. The briefing pack that you have received, members, outlines the department's key achievements broken down by our 4 key objectives or key themes of the strategy: anti-poverty, well-being and innovation, sustainability and inclusive growth, and agility and innovation. I'd like just to share with you some key highlights from each of those 4 areas that we've achieved in the first 9 months. And the anti-poverty theme, which seeks to reduce the number of people living in absolute and relative poverty through a range of cross-cutting interventions, including the efficient management of the social welfare budget of £7 billion in 2021 and introducing enhancements to our discretionary support scheme. Work has also commenced on developing 4 new social inclusion strategies during this period, which are involving expert panels and strategy co-design groups. Furthermore, in light of the pandemic, work has been completed to change the necessary legislation, regulations and operational processes to provide easier and faster access to a range of benefits, including our universal credit, personal independence payment, job seekers allowance, employment support and our financial support. The department allocated 14.5 million across a range of interventions to tackle food needs during the pandemic, and this included 6.6 million in the early stages of the pandemic to primarily support our emergency food box programme in partnership with our local councils and our voluntary and community organisations. Under the Wellbeing and Inclusion theme, which will help everyone within our communities live positive, fulfilled lives surrounded by diverse opportunities to work, enjoy themselves and get involved, we spent approximately 15.3 million on work and wellbeing programmes, helping approximately 8,700 people to find and remain in work, including and getting involved in schemes such as Step to Success, Workable NI, Employment Support, Condition Management Programme and the Access to Work NI Programme. Financial support of over 28 million was also provided to our sports sector to ensure that our sports governing bodies and our clubs survive the impact that the public health restrictions had on their ability to generate income during the COVID-19 period. We secured 85.3 million also investment into our local councils in 2021 and a further £10 million in the 21-22 year. And this will ensure that our partners in local government can continue to positively contribute to the response and the recovery from the COVID-19, including delivering key local services which are imperative at this time. In delivering sustainability and inclusive growth, it supports citizens and our communities by working with them to achieve their maximum potential through a range of economic, cultural and environmental initiatives. 1,242 homes were delivered in 2021 and the Department's Affordable Home Loan Plan pilot delivered 31 affordable homes. Planning permission has also progressed for things such as our Casement Park, which was granted on the 20th of July. And regeneration works are also being steadily processed across Northern Ireland, including areas such as St Patrick's Barracks, Queen's Quays, Queen's Parade and also Fort George. In November 2020, Minister announced the allocation of £145 million of financial transaction capital funding to the Northern Ireland Co-ownership Housing Association, and the Department is its main partner for the delivery of intermediate and affordable housing. This funding will assist 4,000 people into home ownership over the next 4 years. The Department also made available £13 million of financial transactional capital funding for co-ownership to provide a further 422 intermediate homes there, whereby offering help to first-time home buyers who are facing difficulty obtaining traditional mortgages due to lenders tightening their criteria and ownership and withdrawing high loan to value mortgages from the markets. And finally, in relation to agility and innovation, which drives performance with the citizen at the heart of everything we do by setting clear targets, having strong and collaborative delivery structures and maximising technology and maintaining enhancing skills and exercising strong leadership. We provided £4.2 million in the community support programme to support community and resource centres and provide grants to community groups. Furthermore, a number of improvements were also made to some of our internal schemes and operations, such as our PIP assessment process, including the completion of PIP awards reviews in-house, which has now reduced referrals to the PIP assessment providers during the extension period by 25%. The Department also provided £1.3 million to accommodate the safe delivery of essential services, providing IT and digital services to our voluntary and community and our social economy groups that needed to move services to the online platform during the pandemic. The examples members provided today are just a small sample of the incredible work undertaken by our department in the first 9 months of our department's 5-year strategy, providing vital services to our communities, and particularly those most in need. Through effective business planning, closely aligned to our strategic themes, our priorities and our objectives, we aim to build on this good work in the months and indeed the years ahead. In terms of our next steps, preparatory work has recently commenced on the development of our 22-23 departmental business plan, and this will revert to our 12-month business plan horizons from the 1st of April 22 to the 31st of March 2023. It is envisaged that by commencing the process now, we will ensure that a draft business plan is in place and agreed by our Policy and Strategy Subcommittee in advance of the 31st of March 2022, allowing time to update as and when appropriate the 22-23 budget has been finalised. The timeline will also ensure timely rollout of our business plans down to the group levels within our organisation. My business planning team are currently engaging with IT colleagues to investigate potential further enhancements to the online tool portal, including an option to roll out business planning to the next level down to our grade 5 and below director level levels within the organisation. And that will enable us to provide further consistent approach to our business planning across the department and provide online access to tool for all and access to management information for all. The business planning team will shortly be engaging with our senior team and our respective officials and partners to review our first year's performance of the strategy and indeed its plan. It's envisaged that we will undertake a formal review of our strategy with our top leadership team in November. At this point, we will be reviewing our first year's achievements and we will be reviewing the strategic objectives to consider if they're still relevant, do they still meet Minister's expectations and requirements, and do they meet the Executive's priorities, and are they fit for purpose as a strategy as we enter into our year 2. I suppose the next year we operate as a department in uncertain times, and as we begin to come out of the constraints of the pandemic onto the road for recovery. The department and its staff have responded to unprecedented challenges over the past 18 months through the successful adoption of new technologies and new ways of working. It's hoped that adoption of such an innovative, flexible approach will enable our department to meet challenges both new and existing. And those include things like the budget environment in which the Northern Ireland Civil Service is currently operating is a major challenge for the department as we look forward to find efficiencies to deliver our vital services in collaboration with our arm's length bodies and our many delivery partners. The department staff will continue to be key to the delivery of the 5-year strategy, and we face a challenge to ensure that we have the right people working in the right areas at the right time, all of the time. And to this end, we have a People and Resources Project team have been established to obtain an in-depth understanding of how the department is organised to deliver its services as we go forward. And this is to attempt to ensure that we do have the department's resources, the skills and the supply of such in the current places to ensure we are in a position to deliver our ambitious 5-year strategy and our associated plan. Further consideration will also need to be given to the preparation of next year's plan in terms of the challenging ways our customers now expect our services to be delivered. And this will be influenced by the cross-departmental new ways of working team, which are looking at how we respond to challenges like taking on board lessons learned from our response to the COVID-19 over the past 18 months. The approach, no doubt, will be considering new technologies and ways of working to give our customers access to our services and our information online at all times of the day. Members, the plan has been developed on what we know now. However, just as none of us would have predicted the scale of the pandemic over the past 18 months, the department will continue to adjust, to respond to any emergent circumstances that arise throughout the remainder of this business plan year, right up to March 22. To conclude, I would say we feel that in the first 9 months, there has been a really solid start to the department's 5-year strategy. And we are seeking to build on this as we come to the end of our first year and we make plans for our second year. Members, I am really mindful that I have provided you with a brief overview of the changes to our business planning within DFC over the last year, including our strengthened governance, our oversight and our management of our business planning activity, alongside with a snapshot of our key activities and deliveries during the department in the past 9 months. I'm conscious that we provided you a very detailed brief ahead of today, and Michael and I are very content to answer any questions that members may have around the governance, the management of such a plan. If you have specific departmental functions or activities within the plan that we can't answer today, we're very happy to bring that detail back to members and provide that detail at a future meeting or facilitate that information as we go forward. We're also very happy to return to committee following the celebration of our first anniversary events on the department's strategy and the further embedding of the revised business planning within the department if members felt that would be helpful in the new year. I just want to conclude to say, look, thank you so much for your attention this morning and thank you for your time. And both Michael and I are very happy to take any questions now that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda, and I think it was very much worthwhile just highlighting again those key achievements. We know that it has been an extremely busy period with COVID on top of everything else that the department has to do, and I want to put on record my thanks to everyone within the department at all levels of the work that they've done, and I think you described it there as incredible work, and I think that certainly is the case. And I think the department should be very proud of itself with many of those achievements. I just want to then just draw your attention to see that report on the Q3 business plan performance in June 2021 highlights that over 80% of business plan activities are on track for achievement by the end of the 18th month business plan term. 15% are progressing with some delay, and 2% are at significant risk of not being achieved. So just want to ask you, what are those areas that are most at risk? Are you able to tell us that?
Yeah, Michael? Hand you over to Michael to answer that question.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's typical for a usual business planning period that we've experienced over the last years, that as you progress through the year, you will have a number of activities and areas that are at risk in the early quarters, and then they get reconsidered as the passage of time. There are financial processes in place whereby our board and leadership team can make decisions to reallocate funding through the monitoring rounds. But most of those areas, there were 15 flagging as amber at Q3, and the delays were in relation to some external factors such as the progression of legislation, etc., through the executive. And in fact, that was a very key part of the refresh exercise that we completed recently, whereby the permanent secretary wanted us to restate the business plan in terms of what the officials could deliver over that time. So at this stage, the Q3 update was provided to DMB. We flagged to them that we will keep a watching brief on this as we move into the fourth quarter of the 18-month period. And at that stage, we will then flag the specific areas of concern to our Departmental Management Board.
Just following up on Michael has said as well, there's a couple of other things. I think some of the challenges have been around our finances, obviously getting finalisation of our financial budget, but also just making sure that we do get the right people in the right place at the right time. What I will say to committee is that, because we are linking our business plan with our risk management now, we've identified 11 key challenges across the department in terms of our delivery and our ability to deliver. Those are also reviewed on a quarterly basis in line with the policy and resources at the subcommittee. And that is really the purpose of that meeting. It's to have in-depth discussions about, well, what do we do about this? How do we target this? How do we challenge this? How do we manage this? And against each of those 11 strategic risks and opportunities that the department has, there is an action plan associated with that, and there's a lead owner of that supports each of the departmental board to do that. But your specific question was around what are the two delays. Michael mentioned the legislation, which was one of them. The second one was just around financial confirmation of the financial budget, and then the final one was just around our people.
No, and I'm certainly not knocking you in any way. I think that when we say that over 80% are on track for achievement, I think that's to be commended. That's very well done. So it's not to knock in any way. It's just I'm always very aware as a committee that if there are delays in anything, and if there's anything that we can help with, we're here to support. It's not to be negative. It's to be positive. So I think it's also good that if the committee are made aware of things at the earliest possible opportunity, then we can use any influence we have to support on that. So just to say that to you as well. I have some members have raised their hands to ask a few questions. I might come back later again. I have Kelly, then I have Andy.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Linda and Michael. I only wish we could sort of pass on our formal thanks to all the staff in the department officially in some way, because quite often when they're so busy looking down and delivering all that work, they don't actually realise that there are many of us out there that are really impressed and delighted by how quickly they were able to respond, in particular to the COVID pandemic and the amounts of money that had to be rolled out. Just like the Chair, I see our role as a scrutiny committee not just to scrutinise but also to provide support in any way that we can. And just a general thought that I had about the business case and the business planning. We know that the programme for government, I know we have a draft programme for government at the moment. There are some areas that will impact on the department that are not necessarily completely in the department's control, because another department may well have the lead on that one. I was just wondering, has there been any issue, because it's not in the business case, it doesn't show me anything on that. Have there been any issues or anything that we need to be aware of about cross-cutting outcomes where perhaps that the department's aspect of delivery has been hampered because another department can't secure funding or it's not on their priorities? Is there any issues coming forward? Because I'm very aware as a committee, we're scrutinising a department, but some of your work is other departments.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, is there any thought to that and planning ahead? So say, for instance, if there was, for instance, today we've seen that the transfer of functions for the appeals service to justice, and obviously the appeals service has appeared in a number of reports recently. That's obviously out with our committee now, but it does still impact the department. Has there been any problems with that cross-cutting working and how that's going?
I think the short answer to that is probably not. I think that in terms of using our online tool at the moment, we have been sharing what we have developed with some of the other government departments in terms of having similar systems or similar types of systems in place to try and, because I think collating massive amounts of data and information that we have across the piece is really important, particularly if you're reporting on something in programme for government and you're sharing those cross priorities. I think in terms of, there's nothing flagging for us. My team, indeed Michael actually beside me, which I'll maybe ask to speak on this, actually looks after the programme for government, facilitating our returns and our responses around the programme for government. But I'll maybe hand you over to Michael, maybe ask that specific question for you, Kelly, that's helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, as Linda said, we have future-proofed the online tool so that when a programme for government is formally approved and we have the framework, we can identify the business activity within our department that aligns to each of the outcomes per the programme for government. It was my experience previously when we had the previous operational delivery plan that activity was commissioned by the Executive Office with an emphasis on identifying those cross-departmental actions and activities. And obviously then, with the use of our online tool, we would be in a better position then to identify where there are slippages or delays being caused both internally within our own department or where there are impacts from other departments, and we would then work on a collaborative basis with them to try and advance those activities and programmes.
And can I just check where that work will be reported? Because the business plan here is directly communities, as it would be. But I'm just wondering, that collaboration part, will that come into the business plan in the future?
Yes, we're constantly looking at ways to evolve it, but one of the things will be, once the framework is launched, I'd imagine the executive will then commission the activities, as I said, the key activities, and we will report on those. So we have developed the online tool in a way that allows updates to be easily captured by outcome, so they can be reported through the programme for government, reporting up to the Executive Office and out to the wider public.
Okay, I'm very aware, like the business plan runs over a number of years. We know at the moment we have the review of arm's length bodies going on. Plans may be in place for that type of arm's length body to be a partner going forward. I was just wondering, is there any concerns or any risks to delivery of objectives if some of those arm's length bodies through that review are taken out of the system?
I suppose the review of that also sits within our directorate and then within my area on the governance side, Kelly. So the senior team are considering at the moment, obviously there's been a decision made by our minister to review the 9 ALBs, and they've been identified. In terms of those reviews, I think in terms of the activities that we're engaging with the arm's length bodies, there's a very active programme of activities at the minute. With those arm's length bodies, there is quarterly workshops with them. There's a permanent secretary's engagement with those. We will be continuing with business as usual until those reviews kick in, and they're not going to be due in the next, for example, in the next 6 months. Those will not be concluded. So we will be working forward with the plan in terms of the assessment of the 9 ALBs that will be under. It will be the reviews will obviously look at a number of criteria that have been set down by the Department of Finance very clearly about what the objective of those reviews will be. And as we work through, I suppose the most important thing is that some of the activities, whatever efficiencies are made or not, otherwise, that those activities are picked up or delivered either, that the options are either, those things will be delivered in-house, they'll be delivered by the ALB or they're delivered in partnership with that ALB. So I suppose we're at such an early stage of that review at the moment that decision was only taken in August. The senior team are looking at how we take forward those 9 specific reviews, and we had an update with our ALBs and our permanent secretary about a week and a half ago, just to give them an update in terms of we are going to be looking at this and we will be coming back to them. We do have an update with our ALBs on the 5th of October again to give them, we have a meeting on a quarterly basis with the ALB chairs, and we will be updating them at that point in terms of how we're going to move that forward. But the most important thing, I suppose, if we were going forward in the review, is that we make sure that we don't drop any of the priorities. And I think with the fact that we have the business plan in place will ensure that whatever activities we're doing, either in partnership with our ALBs or other partners, will not be missed. We will make sure those are collected, and if they need to change, then we will reflect that in the plans as come forward in the future.
Thank you. I hope that decision sort of ties in with budget planning going forward, so that you're not left with the department having to pick up the pieces if something significantly changes. The other thing I wanted to ask you about is co-production and co-design. As we know, the government has decided that this is the way forward. I was just wondering, as one of the measurements, I don't see a measurement there in how often that co-production and co-design has been built into the system. For instance, we see a lot of the COVID, the knee-jerk reaction, massive amounts of work and money that was put out to support people. But I'm thinking about something like, for instance, in the outcome wellbeing and inclusion, the condition management programme going forward. How are we going to ensure that co-production and co-design is built into the measurements of the effectiveness, and then ultimately to measure the outcome delivery from those outputs?
I think in terms of whether we do it with ALBs or whether we do it with private sector, community or voluntary sector, I think that is certainly a mind shift or a way of working that has been adopted certainly during COVID. I think in most of the initiatives and things that we have going forward, I think there's definitely an aspiration to do that. In terms of measuring it, I suppose with most of our, one of the things that I updated during today was, we are moving down into we have our group plans in place from the end of March, and we're hoping to get down into director plans. And I think that is about getting more performance data, more records of specific initiatives, so we're able to report much more real time on the outcomes of those initiatives and programmes as we go forward. In terms of the co-design, I think in terms of the community involuntary, there's been a community involuntary engagement forum that has been set up during COVID, which is still existing, and there's a range of forums that we have that we'll continue to use. But indeed, if members feel that there's something that additional that we can do, I'm very happy to take those on board and feed those back as well.
I think it's just one of those things that we hear from people quite often, but our voice wasn't heard when actually it was heard, and it was heard through this function, and we can point to a report and say this is when this happened. I know it's very output, but the outcome from it will be so much better. And my final one, Chair, the measurement of outcomes. I know you've talked about the amount of money that has gone out, and we see there, say for instance, Steps to Success, 4.3 million. The amount of work behind that is not insignificant. It's a massive amount of work. And it supported 6,100 benefit recipients. The outcome of that then, I'm just thinking ahead, I know we're in early days on this because it's only 18 months and outcomes take a long time to actually see happen, those societal changes. How are you planning then to measure those societal outcomes? For instance, when we're just looking at that outcome statement, we will help everyone within our communities live positive, fulfilled lives surrounded by diverse opportunities for work, and so on. How, are the delivery agents of those programmes capturing that outcome measurement, because it does feel very woolly, if you know what I mean. It's not outputs, it's not numbers, but it's that societal change that we're driving towards. How's that going to be reported in the future?
I think in terms of the business plan, I mean, one of the things that as we're working towards, I said we commenced some work at the beginning of September on our year 2 plan. I think, and I said as well, we don't rest on our laurels. We have had a good start, but we have lots more that we want to do around this. I think as we go into year 2, one of the things we want to focus on is what is the outputs and then what is the outcomes. And I think the outputs are the things like you've just mentioned, like the new job start programs and things like that, that will take a period of time to develop. We are working very heavily with our partners at the minute in terms of, for example, Deirdre Ward, who looks after Job Start, is obviously putting together the tender documentation and things like that at the moment for those specific initiatives. And those are very much, will have very clear outputs and outcomes attached to each of those specific initiatives. And I think we're looking to do more and more of that as we go forward. We're certainly going to be encouraging that as we go into year 2 of the business plan to make sure we can reflect that where we can. Some of the stuff we can't reflect, but the example you've given, there's no reason why we can't be able to report on that. And I know that's certainly Deirdre Ward's view, who oversees those initiatives, wants to do. Michael, I'm going to hand over to Michael, just as I think you want to add something, Michael, to that.
Yeah, sorry. As Linda said in her opening remarks, we were one of the early pioneers on the NICS-wide review of business planning, and one of the recommendations within that was to adopt an approach to outcomes-based accountability, which is consistent with the new programme for government. And we know as a department that we have a lot of work to do in that. In terms of outcome reporting, typically there...
No, we've just lost you, Michael. Hold on. Michael, we've lost your sound. Is it? Michael, can you hear us? I don't think you can. Linda, can you hear us? Okay. Okay. Michael or Linda, can you hear us?
Our cameras are off.
Oh, everything's just got a bit pear-shaped here. So it has. Oh. Bear with us one moment, folks.
Oh, hello.
Hello. Sorry, we missed Michael speaking there for some reason. The system just had a bit of a gremlin there in it.
How to get back in?
So we can hear you again, Michael.
Can you? Okay.
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
Go ahead, Michael. Sorry, we missed actually the entire answer there, I think. So we did.
Oh.
Sorry about that.
Oh, okay. I'll try again. What I was saying was that, as per Linda's opening remarks, we were early adopters of the NICS-wide review of business planning, and one of those recommendations is that we move to an outcomes-based accountability approach consistent with the programme for government. Now, within that, when you focus on outcomes, there are usually a report card process where we identify what we did, how much we did, how well we did it, and is anyone better off? And it's that last category that we're going to have to work on development over the coming months and years, along with our partners in our professional services unit, our statisticians, to identify new metrics so that we can get an understanding of how money is being invested. Is it providing value for money? Is it making a difference for the citizen and the customer? And we seek to engage with other departments and other delivery partners, but also try and identify what information is readily available out there in the public domain already, and what can we use to enhance our own understanding and our own metrics.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Michael. Exactly what I'm thinking is we have co-production and co-design, which is the outset of delivery, but we don't actually have co-outcome achievement at the moment. So good luck getting that done. I wish you well. I'm glad I'm not having to work that one out. I know Scotland are changing theirs. They're adapting theirs as they move forward, but certainly that collection of the outcome, how things are delivered, how it's changing society, how it's improving society is certainly something that it takes time. We can have all the inputs at this stage, but it does take time when you see a change for a person or for a community. But no, thank you very much, folks. I wish I could pass on my best wishes to all the staff because, to be honest, communities knocked it out of the park. over this last 18 months. It's been absolutely incredible, the amount of resources that were put into our public as a thanks to the work of community staff. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. I have Andy then.
Thanks, Chair. And at the outset, can I echo the comments of the Chair in thanking the broad range of Department for Community staff. 2 specific points, and I appreciate if you can't answer them, but first one, coming back to the Chair's point in relation to delays, you had specifically mentioned legislation. Are you able to detail what legislation that is?
Hello.
Yep. Hello,
Sorry,
go ahead, we can hear you.
Hello. I suppose the legislation that the committee will be aware of, that we have plans to bring some primary legislation around our cultural, some of our cultural programmes and our language programmes, etc.
So it was only that piece of legislation. There's no other piece of legislation. What about welfare mitigation?
I think that obviously there was a delay on a couple of our business plan around a couple of our schemes, but in terms of some of the welfare mitigation, a lot of that has progressed in the last 9 months. But is there something specific, Andy, that you're wanting us to check out?
No, I'm just trying to ascertain. You'd mentioned a delay was specifically legislation, and while it's commendable, the department has got a whole raft of legislation through and more to come, and we know that only too well here in this committee. I just want to better understand: are there other pieces of legislation that the minister's wishing to bring forward that is delayed for whatever reason or another?
We can do a check for you. I think in terms of my comments, they're relating to the language, because I think they're related to about 4 or 5 of our business planning activities. Specifically, we're not able to progress because of that delay. But what we can do, go away and check, is bring you back a list of all of the legislation that was proposed and has been delayed. Happy to do that.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. Thanks very much. And the other
No
point,
worries.
and you're probably not going to be able to answer this, but it's not a get-out clause. I just lay that down. And colleagues will know that I've been pressing this issue for quite a long time. The long overdue sub-regional stadia, where does that fit in the department's delivery process over the next number of months?
In terms of, obviously there has been delays. The planning permission for that particular scheme has been obviously approved on the 28th of July. We are obviously into I suppose the Minister recognises that the sub-stadia programme is a major commitment under a new decade, new approach, and she's committed to that implementation. I suppose in terms of the incoming months, obviously there is an update obviously in the business case that needs to be reviewed, etc., and those are planned in the business planning process in the next 2 to 3 months. Certainly know that Maura Doherty, that's taken that forward, has plans to obviously, as we move out of the planning phase into the update on the particular stadia. But yes, there is a plan of work in place to take that scheme forward.
Yeah, so sorry, maybe there's some confusion there. What you've just outlined is the regional stadia in relation to casement. Obviously there's been progress on that front. I'm referring to the sub-regional, which there has been little way of progress.
I suppose, it has been delayed, and I suppose, but the Minister is committed. I suppose at the point I would say to you is the sub-regional stadia programme, she still is committed to doing that under the new decade, new approach. And she's committed to its implementation. The delivery of the programme, it does provide a real opportunity to contribute to the wider economic priorities and the social, economic, cultural beings of areas and the football family. The Minister has asked us as officials to review that programme to ensure that investment addresses both our current and our future needs of the soccer in the region, and that they've worked to provide, I suppose, a very robust and up-to-date evidence base for her for that programme as it goes forward. The review obviously picks up in the report of the 2015-2016 and the analysis of the 2020 club survey that was undertaken as well. That'll feed through to the advisory committee. But the advisory working group will, I suppose, provide insight into that particular initiative and that particular programme for the Minister. But as I say, she has asked officials to have a wee look at that, and that is ongoing at the minute.
Okay,
so apologies, yes, I did pick you up wrong.
You're okay. So at this stage, there's no indication as when that's likely to come online. It's a wait and see again.
No, I think in terms of the Minister, I think she's very clear that it's something that she's very committed to and wants to see and wants to take forward. I think in terms of it's currently with us as officials to review that programme, ensure that the investment that is planned is evidence-based and that it will meet the future needs of the region and the soccer families that are out there. So I think she is very committed. I suppose all I would say to you, she's very committed to doing it. It's with officials. We will obviously provide the evidence and information that she needs then to take that forward.
I appreciate that.
But I don't have any firm timescales for you today, no.
That's what I was going to ask, timescales.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chair.
Worth a try, Andy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's one of those ones, though. It's been
Yeah.
over 10
Kicking
years
around.
since it was promised, and typically a lot of people are losing hope and faith in that it will ever be delivered. And I know officials are working on it. I'm not knocking the work, but there comes a point when it needs to be rolled out.
Yeah, no, I agree. Oliver, did you say that Mark was waiting to come in? Yeah. Okay, bring Mark in then, please. Hi,
Thank
Mark,
you,
go ahead.
Chair, and thank you, Linda and Michael. Andy got on before me there in terms of the mitigations, so I don't really need to rehash that. But just there in terms of the sub-regional stadia piece, is it in the business plan then, is it, or was it one of the 97 activities?
It's not in at the moment. It is something that's been worked through, and once there is obviously key actions and activities and milestones associated with that, it'll be added to the plan.
But then, therefore, had it been taken out of an earlier business plan? Because, like Andy says, this has been in gestation for quite some time.
It's in the lower, so I suppose it's not in our strategic plan at the moment. It is in some of our group plans as activities for officers to take forward, Mark. And once the detail that the Minister requires to enable her to take that forward, it will be fed into the strategic objectives. As I said, the strategy is a flexible and agile report and a tool, and that, you know, once the Minister has the information and detail to take that forward, then we can add that as a strategic objective, if that's what the requirements at that time leads us to. Do you know what I mean? So,
No, I was just
but
wondering,
it is in the work plan. Yeah, it is.
You know, but no, I'd also just like to, I suppose, echo the sentiments of the Chair and others in terms of the work done by the department, the officials this year. I think you've done remarkably well. They have 83% of the activities on track. The best laid plans often go awry, as we know, and particularly in the context of the last year, the huge challenges facing the public and the huge challenges facing staff, to actually deliver what has been delivered. So again, just to be associated with the words of appreciation and thanks of my colleagues on the committee there.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Nobody else has indicated they want to ask anything, so can I then thank you, both Linda and Michael, for your brief today. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, members, we're going to move swiftly. Oh, just before I move along, Janice has just passed me a note to say that the Minor Capital Works Scheme for Sport opens at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
And will close at noon on the 4th of October. So, for your information.
Chair, could I ask that we write to the executive office to ask for, has there been any progress as the officers have said there, the NICS business planning, it seems that communities is using that, but there will be other departments who, because of this cross-cutting outcomes, will also be reporting on what communities is involved in. But we don't seem to have this clarity of this NICS business planning across all departments and the same one being used. Just wondered if we could write to the executive to ask what are the plans to ensure that there's one single NICS planning or business planning system that is used, and when that we might see that from all departments.
Okay, yep, I'm happy enough with that. Andy?
Chair, can I just come back to the sub-regional point?
Yep.
Can we write to the Minister? I'm cognisant that we're creeping towards the end of this current mandate, just to ask if she can provide a timeline for when she would hope to have sub-regional rolled out, or at least open for applications.
Yeah, because I think sub-regional has been another one of those issues that has been pretty much part of this committee since February last year. So I don't think we'd be asking much by asking where it is.
I'd say it's safe enough to assume it'll be open before the end of the mandate.
Well, let's hope so. Anything else anybody wants to say on any of those issues before I move along? Nope. Okay, so we're going to move on then to agenda item 8, which is a briefing by the Joseph Rowntree Foundation on post-COVID recovery. Members, you'll find this briefing paper at page 185 of your meeting pack. And then can I welcome Chris Britt to the meeting? Chris, you're very welcome. Do you want to give the committee a briefing?
Yeah, thank you. I'm assuming you can see me. I can't see you in the room.
Yeah, we're having a bit of a difficulty here, just in you can't get the staff in here in this room to work these things properly. Yeah, we can see you and hear you loud and clear.
Okay, no problem. Well, thanks firstly very much for having me. I won't repeat in detail what I've put in the written briefing, which hopefully you've had a chance to digest. But I thought it'd be useful just to give a bit of an opening spiel, if that's okay. I mean, I think in Northern Ireland, like the rest of the UK and much like the rest of the world, we have had our eyes open to some of the horrific effects that poverty can have on our communities. I mean, people in the lowest income communities have suffered the most from COVID, and that is much because of the conditions which we had entering the pandemic. So this is a vital time for both your committee and the executive to be thinking about how we can transform the lives of people living in poverty in Northern Ireland. But I think we also need to keep in mind that the pandemic has really shone a pretty harsh light on the inequalities that existed before we went into the pandemic. So let's, there's lots of welcome language about not going back to where we are before, and I think that's really important. I think one thing, though, in that context that is really important to recognise is the looming cut to both universal credit and working tax credits. That will be a devastating decision for families in Northern Ireland. Losing, it's often called £20 a week or £1,000 over the year. I think for me, one of the more helpful ways to frame it is think, most people are going to get that as over £80 a month. I think all of us could consider what our monthly bills are that are about £80. Gas bills are about to shoot up all over Northern Ireland. And yet 80 quid is going to be taken out of people's household budgets. This, sadly, is going to make people hungry. It's certainly going to make people anxious. And I think, it is incumbent upon the UK government to reverse that decision. It will be devastating. And frankly, it does show us going back to before, which people say that they don't want, but this really would be a really retrograde decision. I've done a bit of extra modelling before I came along to you today. We think about 165,000 families or people in Northern Ireland will be affected by the cut to universal credit and working tax credit. That's about 40% of all families in Northern Ireland with children, and 1 in 5 of all people generally. It will be devastating. I mean, and another thing, it will take money out of family budgets, but it will also take money out of local economies. People on low incomes have to spend all their money, and they tend to spend it more locally. And so businesses which are already struggling because of the pandemic through no fault of their own are also going to have part of their demand taken away too. So it's a wrong-headed decision that needs to change. Just to reflect briefly on some of the elements of the written submission, housing in Northern Ireland is one of the reasons that the overall poverty rates are lower in Northern Ireland compared to elsewhere in the UK. A similar pattern is actually seen in Scotland, but there's a worrying increase in the number of people having to rely on the private rented sector, which is very poorly regulated at the moment. So people are often having to pay higher rents and for poor conditioned housing. So, and with the sort of spiralling of social housing waiting lists, it really underlines how important it is for a continued, in fact, accelerated investment in social housing within Northern Ireland. And thinking about the COVID recovery plan in particular, There's lots of focus and understandable focus on how do we help young people who are going to be particularly impacted by the pandemic, and how do we ensure people are getting the jobs of the future. But let's also not forget those who, when we went into the pandemic, were furthest from the labour market. Single parents, people with disabilities, people with real structural barriers within their lives which prevent them from getting into jobs. So how do we redouble our efforts to help those people to get into work and provide their families with the quality of life that we all rightly expect? And I suppose just lastly as well, in terms of my own background, I mean, I worked prior to the Joseph Rowntree Foundation for a long time in the Scottish Government, so I'm kind of well aware of the efforts there, and some of that is being reflected in some of the debate that we're having in Northern Ireland around things like setting targets or having a commission for tackling poverty, looking at how PIP is provided in Northern Ireland. Obviously in Scotland we're just in the process of bringing replacement payments for PIP and DLA, and things like the Scottish child payment have been introduced in Scotland and will have quite a significant impact on child poverty, but they don't come with Barnett consequentials from the UK government, so the Scottish government are having to find money from elsewhere to pay for those. And just lastly, I was able to overhear some of your previous session where people were talking about the co-production of policy solutions, and you know, we are strong advocates of the best policy being made with the people who will be impacted by it makes the best policy. So co-production, working with people with lived experience, which you have actually seen in some of the new social security payments with Scotland to positive effect. So I'm also more than happy to answer questions on the position in Scotland as well, if the committee would find that helpful.
Yep, Chris, thank you very much for your briefing. And I know that you had written to us some time ago to come in and brief the committee, so we're glad to eventually have you here with us. And I'm sure you are aware that this committee has supported the continuation of the £20 uplift and has been part of that delegation with the other devolved legislatures in writing to Westminster in support of that. We also here have in Northern Ireland have people who are waiting now over a year on appeals for their PIP and have lost money through that as well. So that compounded with the loss of this will definitely have a detrimental effect, not only on those families and those households, but also, I think you were quite right to mention that there as well, also on the economy, because this money is spent locally. So it is. So I think it's it's a bit short-sighted, a bit of short-sightedness there from the government whenever they're deciding to take this away. Also here in Northern Ireland, and you were right to say, we have an over-reliance on the private rented sector, which is leading to housing costs becoming more expensive in Northern Ireland. So I also want to ask, what I do want to ask you is about the reduction in poverty in recent years in Northern Ireland. We certainly, as a committee and as elected representatives and constituency MLAs, probably would say we haven't seen a reduction at all there. Just where is that information coming from, and do you think that is likely to continue, or will we see that change in any way?
Well, I think it's important to keep it in its right context, as these are measures of relative poverty. So how average wages move around and things has an effect on the rates. But I think what you'll see in Northern Ireland is before housing cost poverty. So it's basically your poverty as regards your income hasn't really gone anywhere. It's at the same level of the rest of the UK. But as housing costs have been comparatively kept down, that would see people potentially having more money to spend on things other than their housing costs. But the same system of universal credit exists in Northern Ireland, and it's woefully inadequate across the UK. And again, issues of low pay, inability to secure enough hours, inability for people like single parents even to get into the labour market are just as acute. I mean, when I used to work in the civil service, I would often say this to my colleagues, is people like yourselves, elected members, see more members of the public than civil servants do, frankly. And you will not have felt over the last few years, and particularly over the pandemic, that people would have felt like their overall quality of living has improved. So I think the statistics are a useful means for us to see longer term trends, etc. But I think you're right to take them with a pinch of salt, because I'm not sure for people across Northern Ireland that will have felt like the progress that they were seeing.
Yeah, and I can certainly say that when you talk about earlier about co-production, some of the most powerful witness sessions that we have had as a committee, and certainly in my time as an elected representative over the years, have been actually from the people that our decisions affect. And I do sometimes think that when legislation is being drafted, it is not being drafted at looking at the person and how, you know, whatever we do affects that person. So I think that there needs to be more co-design around any legislation that we pass. Just wanted to ask you then, Chris, just if you can briefly just give us a bit more information on the proposals the Scottish Government are putting forward to change things themselves within some of the benefit system. I mean, we've had welfare mitigations here for some time in Northern Ireland that has been paid out of our own budget as well. So just if you give us just a short brief on that of what the government in Scotland are doing from their perspective.
Of course. I mean, as regards universal credit, I mean, they have fewer powers than our Irish Assembly and Executive have. So the mitigations that you have in place are actually fuller and I would argue more effective than those that are in Scotland as regards universal credit. So it would certainly echo the calls of organisations across Northern Ireland for those to be made permanent. In terms of other payments, I think most significantly, from your perspective, is obviously in Scotland they are introducing, literally as we speak, the Child Disability Assistance Payment, which is a replacement for children's PIP, and the Adult Disability Assistance Payments is being brought in over the next year or so. And I think when you talk about co-production, that's actually a very good example of how to do that policy development and legislation work properly. Now, it takes time because you need to involve people, you need to give them space to explore their experiences and ideas. But one of the things that came through from that work with folk was about the dignity in the system, the system recognising the personal experiences of each person who comes to them. So I think that's been really positive. And what you've seen in the design of the new system is taking out some of the in-person assessments, taking out the regularity of reassessments for people's PIP. Now, payment levels are still at the same level as what you would get from DWP, so that hasn't really improved. But our hope, and I know the Scottish Government's hope, is that people will experience a far more dignified and friendly and supportive system than certainly is provided by the DWP in England. And in terms of the payment for that, it's more similar to how it would work in Northern Ireland. So there is a Barnett consequential is passed from the UK government to Holyrood to cover the cost of that. Although I think they are concerned that if this new system is is easier to navigate for people who are eligible, that take-up should increase. And in fact, they want take-up to increase. And that won't mean their budget increases. So it could well put additional pressures on the Scottish Government's wider budget as more people come forward who are eligible. Now, that's something that the Scottish Government want to happen, but it will have that consequence of squeezing other budgets. As regard the Scottish Child Payment, which is started for children under 6 at the moment and is to be rolled out to all children under 16 by the end of next year, that comes from the Scottish Government's budget in the same way that it would have to pay for health or education. There is no transfer from the UK Government for it. So the first tranche of it will cost running close to about £200 million a year. And the Scottish Government are also committed to doubling that, so it'll increase to about 400 million. So just to put that in the context of the Scottish budget, I mean, the sort of disposable Scottish budget to the Scottish Government is in the kind of low 30 billion. So it's not a kind of crazy amount of money, but it's certainly a significant amount of money. And even if you compare it to the income tax changes that the Scottish Government have made, you know, that has been looking to raise within individual years about 300 to 400 million pounds. So, you know, these are significant additional investments that will put pressure on the Scottish Government in other ways, but from my perspective, will have very positive impacts on child poverty rates within Scotland, and we would expect them to fall by 2 or 3% as a result of this Scottish child payment. So, you know, as with all politics and government, life is full of choices, and the Scottish Government have made that choice, and they've got to deal with the consequences of it, but we obviously support them in doing so.
No, thanks, Mark, for that. I think we have a watching brief on that as it goes along, and I mean, I think that money spent, especially on those on early years and helping families early on, certainly leads to better outcomes when it comes to health and education. So it does have that knock-on effect where you spent money to save money. So yeah, we'll definitely be watching that. I have. Oh, sorry, I keep calling you Mark, Chris. I have Mark written here in front of me because Mark wants to come in and speak, so he does. So apologies for that, Chris. Mark, if you want to go ahead.
I'm always on your mind, Chair.
You are.
Thank you for that, Chris. Sorry, I was a bit distracted. I got a wasp sting on the eye in the course of your presentation. Very, very interesting stuff, very sobering stuff there, Chris. I always look forward to, I suppose, the information and data that your organisation comes out with. I wouldn't say I look forward to it, but I would lean heavily on it and put a lot of store in it. I'm particularly interested, I suppose, given the topicality of it, your observations on the impact of the removal of the universal credit uplift. This is an issue I have been raising here locally, and you referred there to going back to before. Like, the removing the uplift will be going back to how things were before, but it's actually going to be much worse than before, given the huge increase that we have seen in living costs, whether that be energy, rents, or just bloody groceries. Everything's gone way up. Also, the point you make around the wider economic impact, I don't think enough has been made of that. And I have reached out to some organisations, business organisations here locally, to try to get them to wake up and speak up about this, because ultimately it's actually going to push more people out of work and onto the benefits system, in my view. Whenever you're taking out here in Northern Ireland, I'd say by my back of the envelope calculations, around £120 million a year. That's just not something, particularly at this time as we're meant to be recovering from COVID, that businesses can absorb. We have a scheme here that should be opening soon. I don't know if you caught that, us discussing this earlier in committee, but a high street voucher that £100 is going to be issued to everyone over 18 here in Northern Ireland. And the idea behind this is to stimulate the economy. Yet at the same time, the UK government are looking to take £80 a month out of households. And that's households where this £80 is being spent on the high street, and very promptly as well. It's not going in the offshore accounts. I think you can be safe enough or to assume the £80 enough a month figure as well. That's stark when you consider it in the context, I think, of any household. But if you look at the impact on under 25s, on universal credit, this at times could represent maybe in the region of a quarter of their monthly income. And I don't know how anyone is meant to absorb a cut like that and survive thereafter. The chair mentioned there drew a bit more out of you in terms of the reduction in poverty here in Northern Ireland. I don't know, had you done any sort of further distillation or gone down into almost sub-regional analysis, because there are some constituencies here in Northern Ireland that would lag way behind others. My own constituency being one of them, where we seem to be top of all the leagues that you want to be bottom of, and bottom of all the ones that you want to be top of. Sorry, I'm just trying to read my scrawled notes through one eye here. The private rental sector stuff, that's interesting, particularly given that we've just started now, and it will be coming to the committee, a private tenancies bill. And I mean, it's a very welcome piece of work, but I believe that we as a committee will have the opportunity to make it even more robust and effective in terms of insulating or protecting people from being plunged further into poverty. And I'd certainly be look forward to maybe your own organisation responding to our call for evidence on that as well. There's a wee part there on solutions to poverty, Chris. I think that's very interesting too. And at the risk of sounding like a Tory, one of the best solutions to poverty is job creation. I don't think it's as simple as the Tories make it. Don't just go and get more hours. That's definitely not the way, especially when there are going to be fewer hours across all businesses to give. But I think it's something that governments, whether that be in Westminster, certainly us as devolved governments, should be looking at what type of jobs they can create and where. And that goes back to me sort of regional balance point I was making earlier. You'd also touched there in terms of Scotland's efforts and ideas and what they're doing to alleviate poverty. It's great to see places making devolution work and trying to use every, I suppose, tool in their box to do so. We do have greater powers when it comes to welfare. We do have mitigations. I mean, and I think that certainly is reflected in the statistics that you've given in terms of where we are compared to other regions. But they're outside of those extra powers. That's money that we just took out of other budgets. If you like, that was a decision that was made, and the right decision. But I think we should be looking at how those powers can now be used to protect people in the, I suppose, in the mouth of this removal of the universal credit uplift too. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Sure. Well, it's quite a lot in there. I've scribbled down some of your points, and if I forget anything important, do shout. I think your point on local data is really important, because part of the issue from our perspective now, we could be doing and should be doing a lot more in Northern Ireland, and before the election next year, we'll have our Poverty in Northern Ireland report, which will take a chance to get a bit deeper into some of these issues. But in Northern Ireland and in Scotland, we do have the same issue. There is a paucity of data, in particularly down to kind of local authority areas, which makes it really difficult, because let's face it, poverty in Belfast is not going to be the same as poverty in Fermanagh, and it's really important to see different communities through the prism of that community, not to try and take a kind of national picture and project it down onto smaller areas. So you're quite right, and that comes on to your point about jobs as well, is that it isn't just around kind of supercharging one area of a country. The jobs have to be available in different geographic areas, but they also have to be available to the people who can't get jobs. So, at the moment we have a lot of focus on young people, because, what a horrible time over the last couple of years for folk coming out of schools or going to colleges or universities. Your heart bleeds for them. That should be a part of your life when you're really trying to explore your potential, etc. So I totally get the focus on that group. But single parents, they're at the moment completely locked out of the labour market by the cost of transport, by the cost of childcare.
Yeah, look at childcare here in Northern Ireland compared to other regions.
Exactly, and that's a real practical barrier. So people like Teresa Coffey saying, "Oh, just get a couple more hours job," is a bit of a slap in the face for families who would love to work but can't because of all the other costs. So I think what I would encourage you to think about in that space is how do you specifically, I'll trip over that word, support families in the particular barriers that they face. So yeah, for some young people, it will be about the skills that they have and all of that kind of thing. But that's going to be completely different support that you need for single parents or completely different support that you need for somebody who's disabled. And so really focusing and understanding people's problems and working with them to fix them is really important. And yeah, I've seen the private tenancies bill. I mean, I think it's really important. It will take on some of the more, some of the kind of early acute problems, but really quality of housing, people's tenure, people's understanding of their rights. I mean, we've heard examples of people in Northern Ireland who didn't realise there was an eviction ban during the pandemic. So private landlords were evicting people when they weren't able to. So, the private rental sector in Northern Ireland, while it is comparatively cheap, compared to the rest of the UK, it's very badly regulated, allowing people to pay a lot for often poor housing and to not have a really good handle on their rights. So yeah, we'd be more than happy and keen to respond to that call for evidence, because I think it's vital. If I would always advocate for greater investment in social housing, and again, finding that in the right places, the right size, is really important. But while people still have to rely on the private rented sector, really strengthening regulation, people being aware of their rights, because there are some brilliant advice agencies in Northern Ireland for housing advice, etc. But it's an awful complicated system to navigate for individuals and for those advice agencies.
No, thank you, Chris.
Okay, Mark, thank you. I have then Kelly and then Anya. So Kelly.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chris, for the report. Chris, I think we were all sort of taken aback whenever the Minister in Westminster, Teresa Coffey, said that if people wanted to make up that £20 per week, they could work an extra 2 hours. I wish the jobs in Northern Ireland could pay that amount of money, instead of the minimum wage, but there we go. There is an issue with the £20 per week, as we all know. We would need to pay that to continue on out of our block grant that we receive. So we'll have to see, at least with Northern Ireland, as you've recognised, the mitigation measures that have been put in place do go in some way to protecting citizens here. But when you're getting that amount of money taken out of your pocket, it makes life extremely difficult whenever the costs have increased, as Mark has said so much here. We do have discretionary support. It's discretionary, so whether or not you get that support is questionable, but there we go. I just wanted to pick your brains. There's one of the tables within the report that talks about the economic inactivity in Northern Ireland compared with the UK average. The first sort of part of the bar chart of percentage of 16 to 64-year-olds. Is that part where it shows the economic activity? Is that just it broken down then? The next the next parts, the next bars that are shown, so student, family, home, sick, disabled, retired, others. So that's actually the makeup of that figure for the first column.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, no problem. So we can see then from your report that Northern Ireland does have a significantly higher rate of economic inactivity compared to the rest of the UK. But to be very clear, these are people who are students, who are either looking after their family or their home. They are sick or disabled, which is is a lot higher. They're retired, and then the other are the economic people basically who are looking for work, I take it, and that's under the amount. What's the other stand for?
So if you're economically, the way these surveys work is people will be asked, are you looking for work, which would be sort of actively trying to get a job, and that you'd be marked then as unemployed. So if you're unemployed, you're actively searching. If you're economically inactive, that means you're not actively searching for work. So the other groups that you've mentioned, so if you're a student, understandably, you would be looking for work, or if you've got some sort of caring responsibilities. I mean, the other will be in all sorts of different things. It could be very temporary, or you're between jobs, or you're maybe about to move to another country or something like that. So it's a kind of ragtag of different reasons why people wouldn't be looking for employment at that time. But yeah, Northern Ireland has a strikingly higher rate of economic inactivity to the rest of the UK, even to Scotland, which has a higher rate than elsewhere, than certainly in England. And that the bit which would concern me most, or does concern me most, is that far higher rate of sickness and disability, because it's a kind of which came first, the chicken and the egg thing, is that, these are people who, some of these will be symptoms of poverty, long-term poor mental health or substance abuse or other things. So that, to me, would be one of the indicators you would look at and say, well, while relative poverty rates might be a wee bit lower in Northern Ireland compared to elsewhere in the UK, that inactivity figure is a real symptom of the struggles that do exist in Northern Ireland.
And as you mentioned before, the co-production and co-design, we need to bring out those anecdotal evidence of what is impacting people. Being Northern Ireland, which is on the edge of the United Kingdom, on the edge of Ireland, on the edge of Europe, it's a small place. When we talk about economic inactivity, and while there may be reasons that people are not, looking for work, is there actually even work out there for them to go to, which is the other problem? Because I know that there's a lot of people who would say, oh sure, there's jobs out there, you can go and work in a bar or a restaurant or whatever, but when the money is so low, you can't pay your electricity bill, you can't pay your gas or your oil heating, from that type of wage. Quite a lot of our people on universal credit, of course, are the working poor. At least a third of people on universal credit here are in work. I wanted to just ask you about the adult payment in Scotland. Is that in addition to DWP's PIP, or is it instead of?
No, it's a replacement for it. Okay. So from next year, I forget the exact dates, but from next year, if you become eligible for the payment, you will apply for the Scottish Disability Assistance Payment rather than PIP. And then people who are on PIP or DLA at the moment over the next few years are being transferred into the Scottish system. So yeah, it's a complete replacement of the PIP system.
Okay, and then I'm just checking, I wanted to find out on that, because when we have our mitigations coming through here, we have to make sure that they're disregarded from universal credit so that it doesn't impact benefits. I take it that's the same for Scotland, where the adult payment or the child payment isn't taken as an income base to be deducted off. Yeah,
exactly. Although, to be fair, the DWP were their position on this does seem to have hardened a wee bit. So they haven't said anything around those disregards at the minute, but they do seem to be taking a slightly more aggressive approach towards the Scottish Government as regards those issues. But yeah, for now, those wouldn't impact on your eligibility for other benefits.
Okay, brilliant. Chris, I'm just thinking, I know, to be honest, like Mark, I read the Joseph Rowntree and I use your figures and often to help me make decisions and to look where Northern Ireland's going. I was looking at the conclusions of your report, comparatively low cost of living compared to the rest of the UK mask underlying low income that makes people's lives fragile and vulnerable to economic shocks. And we're certainly seeing that at the moment. The home heating hike is definitely putting pressure on people at exactly the time that the £20 uplift is coming out, exactly the time that furlough is coming to an end. So we're looking at I believe, a catastrophic winter for Northern Ireland, probably across the whole of the UK, the whole of Ireland. But I'm just wondering, are there any other reports that you have coming forward? I know you've mentioned there that there's a proposal for Poverty in Northern Ireland report that will be coming out at the end of the year, potentially. Is that still on target to come out then, or January?
Yeah, I think it will be January at the latest, to be honest. We appreciate that, the election campaign will be ramping up by then, so we'd obviously want it want that information to be there for parties as they're developing their manifestos in the run up to the election. So yeah, and that will be sort of, I want to delve into a bit more of the detail around, particularly around the work situation and inactivity and how we take that on, because I mean, as Mark said, Social Security is completely inadequate, needs to be more supportive. But ultimately, one of the most powerful tools for lifting people out of poverty is their ability to secure a good income from work. And in Northern Ireland, that has been a struggle for quite some time. And then with welfare reform over the last few years, that's been made even worse. So it's harder and harder for people to get a decent income from work. So I mean, I've literally just come from the Scottish Parliament having the same debate in their Social Justice Committee. The people that we shouldn't forget in this discussion are employers. Most decisions about people's wages or their conditions are made in boardrooms, not in assemblies and Parliament. So how the executive and the assembly can work with employers to help provide flexible, reliable work to people. Because I think, as you said, it's no use telling a single mum with 2 young kids to go and be an HGV driver. That just doesn't reflect reality. So I think it's really important to work with employers to drive home how much value they can bring to communities and to people if they pay well and give people good conditions.
And unfortunately, we know with employers, the Institute of Fiscal Studies have said that they have a concern that this national insurance increase that's coming forward will actually put employers off recruiting more people or going forward for pay increases or anything like that because of the increased amount that they have to pay out, for their employees. I was thinking actually of your report that's coming out December or January time. It's actually just about the time that the forward business cases will be made for budgets in Northern Ireland. We're hoping it'll be a multi-year budget as opposed to another annual budget, and it'd be useful to have any suggestions on actions that government can take to help lift people out of poverty can be considered as budget investments.
Okay. Well, I'll try and come back to the committee then as quickly as I can with some of that detail and note those timescales.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you as always to Joseph Rowntree for the amount of work that you do in research. It must be quite depressing at times when you never see things changing, but it's always worthwhile to have data. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. Anya?
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Chris. Look, I'd just like to thank you first and foremost for your comprehensive brief. I know Mark and both Kelly have touched on my next question, and it's just in relation to the co-design group when they're advising in the development of the anti-poverty strategy. Chris, in your own opinion, and I suppose experience, what are the key priorities that you would like to see emerge from this anti-poverty strategy?
Well, I think it doesn't always lend itself to this is just a big policy that needs money on it. But one of the things that we hear from people who are living in poverty, wherever they are, whether it's Northern Ireland, Scotland or anywhere else, is that we have a system of support which is incredibly complicated. In some ways, it's quite abusive. I mean, things like PIP are really horrible things to try and access, so people don't try and access them. If you get into difficulty with your rent, you've got to deal with you have to deal with the housing executive, you'll have to deal with your benefits, everything's really complicated. I mean, we talked about the discretionary support which is available for people, the mitigations, the grants for your 5-week loan, 5-week wait. It's so hard as an individual to navigate your way through the support. The way I put it in the Scottish Parliament before I was speaking to you, if the support, trying to access the support that you would need if you have a crisis in your life, you have to go to X number of different people, provide them all with the same information. If that was a bank that you were using, you would quit that bank and go to another bank. It's far too complicated for people to access. And then the other thing is, I think, just scale. is we often have, and there will be things, within programmes for government across the UK which sound really kind of worthy. They're good things. They're helping small groups of people. But if we try and help absolutely everyone with absolutely everything, we'll inevitably spread ourselves too thin. So really looking at the areas where we can invest our public services to help people explore their lives and explore their quality of life is really important. So things like big investments in social housing, ensuring social security is there when you need it, and also looking to how do we give people the skills and remove the barriers to get them into jobs. Really concentrating, doing big things and scale on those things are the things which can open stuff up for people who are living in poverty just now.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, thanks, Sonia. Thanks, Chris. Really appreciate you coming in and briefing us today on this. And I absolutely, as Kelly and Mark and others have said, we very much rely heavily on the work that the Joseph Rowntree Foundation do and the information that they provide for us. To us is invaluable. I think we will be watching Scotland as they progress with the initiatives that they're putting forward to see if Northern Ireland can look at any of those and replicate as well. So thank you for today. Really, really appreciate you coming in and briefing us.
No, not at all. And thanks a lot for having me, and hopefully speak to you all again soon.
Thank you. Cheers, Chris. Bye-bye.
Cheerio.
Okay, folks, we're going to then move along to agenda item 9, which is a briefing by Training for Women Network on the WICT programme. Members, you'll find the briefing paper at page 201 of your meeting packs. And can I then welcome Norma Shearer and Amanda Layton to the meeting? I think we have Elizabeth Thompson down here as well, but I don't know if Elizabeth is joining us. Norma, you can let us know. Oh, there she is. Yep, we have everybody there. We do indeed. Look, thank you very much. Norma, do you want to, and just to say thank you for attending as well. It's very short notice. Normally when people come to present to us in committee, they get weeks in advance to prepare. You kind of had less than a week to prepare, so thank you for coming in. So if I can just hand over to you, Norma, if you want to begin your briefing.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Communities Committee. I was going to introduce us, but you've done that, Paula, so I don't need to do that bit. But maybe just to say, Amanda Layton is the Foyle Women's Information Network Coordinator for the project in the Northwest, and Elizabeth Thompson is the Project Manager for the Women in Community Transformation Programme and the Intervention Forum Secretariat. I'd like to thank you all for the opportunity you've given us to brief the committee on the successes and the tremendous work that has been achieved by many of the women on the Women in Community Transformation Project. We're extremely proud of the work that the 4 organisations have managed to do, despite the challenges that COVID has brought into the lives of us all, but especially the women who live in areas that have been blighted by paramilitarism. This programme has helped develop groups to take up the mantle in their areas to make things better for their own community. These women have been relentless in their deeds and their actions, and they've gained the confidence and skills to undertake the following: forming committees, delivering food parcels, keeping peace in areas where tensions are high, challenging behaviours, campaigning for services, addressing issues such as money lending, mental health, prescription drug misuse, alcohol and domestic violence, and policing, to name but a few. And many of them have been threatened and have been put under threat for the efforts that they've made. Many participants have also gone on to represent their communities on boards, they've obtained jobs, they've progressed in their careers, and generally positively influenced many lives, be it within the community, the family, or further afield. My colleagues and I are very proud of these women, and for yourselves, I'd like to read a few of the comments that the women have made. My life changed when I did the programme. It opened my eyes. I'd always supported paramilitaries and didn't see the damage. Now I know better. I'll speak out. One young woman contributed to the disability section of a policy document working with the British Mission in America during the Committee for the Status of Women. No mean feat for a young woman who had never left her street. I received an email recently from a young woman who said, "I'd never have had the courage or the belief to get the job I've just been offered without the Women in Community Transformation programme." There's hundreds of stories like this. Women from the programme have taken up opportunities to meet ministers, senators, local representatives, as well as politicians and delegates from around the world, including at the Committee for Status of Women in New York, all of whom have been impressed by their courage and their convictions. These women have overcome great adversity, and the last 18 months has not been easy for any of them, but they've persevered. However, despite the ongoing challenges, the partnership were able to recruit a further 110 women in April, while still retaining and supporting over 500 of our original participants, offering them progression through mentoring, train the trainer, ABCD, ILM levels 3 to 5, to name but a few. The programme has also fostered and created the accumulation of social capital and developed collaborative ways of working with and between communities, such as through the Intervention Forum. The Intervention Forum comprises of women from across 27 locations in Northern Ireland who are determined to change and make it a better place for everyone. With that said, the task of the partnership has been made more difficult by department officials who give the impression of being determined to dismantle the building blocks of a successful programme that all women and staff have led to date. The successes of the programme and the first evaluation made specific reference to the combined synergy and support between the partnership and the department, added to the success and overall management and delivery of this programme. Unfortunately, after a change of staff, this hasn't been the case for quite some time. There's been a disconnect, and this has added on a whole new layer of stress to my staff and our partners and the women, and times that we have to spend defending ourselves against inaccurate information. The Independent Reporting Commission, in their third report, recognised the positive work that the Women in Community Transformation Programme was delivering and pointed out the momentum is building as the programme progresses. It further points out that women who are part of the programme have taken on greater leadership roles in COVID community response, teams which are encouraging and to be commended. The IRC also recommended that the Women in Community Transformation Network, with other women's regional groups and representatives of the women's sector, build on recent sectoral work on the role of paramilitaries in illegal money lending. It's timely for us to speak to you all today, as the new and, in our opinion, diluted version of the programme was launched on Tuesday. Sadly, and despite repeated promises that the partnership would be kept informed of future plans, it was only via Kelly Armstrong MLA that we learnt of the new programme late on Tuesday afternoon. The new programme for us is bewildering, and quite frankly, in our opinion, it's shocking. In no way does it build on the work that has gone before, and it totally dilutes the co-design process. The partnership would like to know the rationale for changing the process, and will the model be applied across the whole Tackling Paramilitarism programme? Why were women in the Intervention Forum let down by the Minister? What is the rationale for not following the 8 areas already identified through the Tackling Paramilitarism programme? Is this new programme not similar to elements under the B4? And it's possibly a duplication of the family support programme that's been funded by the European Social Fund. Why was there no consultation? And how can continuity and standardisation be made and protected? Where do existing women go from the WIT programme? There's no progression for them at all in this new approach, nor role for the lasting legacy of the programme. Many women will now be dropped. There'll be staff losses, volunteer losses, and a model that has been amazingly tremendous has now been totally ignored. This programme promotes outdated and frankly shocking gender roles by assuming that a woman's role is strictly within the family. It limits the performance and enactment of their agency to the self-policing of these norms, and thus the deviancy of women who dare to take on roles that are not related to the family. The new programme doesn't address the overarching Tackling Paramilitarism programme aims, nor does it seem to fit with the additional work that the WIT partnership have done, or the linkages that have been made to contribute to the overall Tackling Paramilitarism programme, such as Crime Stoppers and Stop Attacks, etc. It would appear that the momentum, energy and commitment to tackling paramilitarism, which was apparent at the beginning of this programme, appears to have been diminished and replaced with a softer programme, which really can't achieve the original objectives. In conclusion, we don't believe this new programme is fit for purpose. It's short-changing women who have committed so much time and energy to building a stronger, better society.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Norma. Thank you for your presentation. It was very hard-hitting, and I think it will be a lot of food for thought here for us as a committee. I mean, the communication between the department and yourselves has been pretty poor, to say the least, on the way forward for this programme. I know that this committee had written on several occasions to the department to highlight the issues, and we've ended up yet again at the 11th hour with, from what you're saying, a lot of women who are going to be let down because there doesn't seem to be that progression or that way forward. And that whole idea of a softer programme, I mean, I've been around for a number of years working within the women's sector, and you know, we don't need softer programmes. We need programmes that are hard-hitting, that actually deal with the issues that are relevant to women today, and to see them have purpose and progress in life. So from what your briefing you've told us, it's extremely worrying how this new programme is going to progress. You've laid out quite clearly how it is going to affect the women, and it really is quite concerning about the amount of women who are already on the programme, and where do they go from here. So I was going to ask you, you know, given the recent announcement, how do you think it's going to affect things? But you've already laid that out straight, and it's going to affect many women across Northern Ireland. I suppose then we need to move on to see just what sort of actions we as a committee can take at this point around this, which we'd be willing to listen to you, Norma and Elizabeth and Amanda, about going forward. So I suppose that's, firstly, I just want to ask that, you know, what do you see, you know, how has this been designed in your opinion? Who have they consulted with? Where's the co-design here? You know, is this meeting the needs of the women as you see it, because you have been working with them for such a long time and are best placed to give that opinion?
Paula, thanks for that. I seriously think questions need to be asked around, one, consultation, and two, design. There's no consultation with, from our knowledge, with any of the women's sector, for one. There's no consultation with, more importantly, the women who have been on this programme now for 5.5 years. The design of this new programme is totally diluting the co-design process that was put in place 5.5 years ago to establish what the needs of women in Northern Ireland are. It doesn't contribute, or I would ask the question, how does this new programme, or proposed programme, contribute to the overall, the overarching tackling paramilitarism programme aims, and how does it align with the programme for government? Because after all, during our co-design process 5.5 years ago, we spent a hefty 3 months developing an OBA framework for the Women Involved in Community Transformation Programme in consultation with experts in the field across the women's sector, across Department for Justice, probation sector, every sector known was around that table, who came up with the needs of women to help tackle paramilitarism within communities. A big worry for me personally in managing this programme is the fact that nowhere in this proposal, absolutely nowhere, does it take into account the one-to-one individual support that has been given to women over the last 5.5 years. We're working with women who are wives, mothers, sisters, daughters of active paramilitaries who required extensive individualised one-to-one support. That has been totally missed out of this new proposal. Where do those women go now? How do they be supported? And how do those women who are creating change within communities riddled with paramilitarism continue to create change and make these communities safer for people to live in?
No, I think you make some good points there, Elizabeth, because I know certainly as a North Belfast representative, paramilitarism is alive and well and growing. And I know also from working alongside the women's sector, just how much paramilitarism affects women's lives and the control over women's lives and the control over our communities. And yeah, that whole tackling paramilitarism, which is what you have been doing for so long, where is it in this new scheme? And that is a question we need to ask. Also, part of the money for this comes from the Department for Justice, under that stream. So there should be something within this that is looking at that. So no, they're good questions that you've certainly brought up, Elizabeth. I know that we'll continue this discussion. We've got Andy and Kelly waiting to come in, so I'll go to Andy first.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Norma, Amanda, Elizabeth. Good to see you all again. I have had the fortunate opportunity to engage with you on many occasions, and it's evident throughout each time I've engaged with you your passion and dedication to deliver the WIC programme and the many other programmes that you're involved in. So for me, that's vitally important, the experience that you have garnered from the WIC programme. It's fair to say the department haven't taken or haven't sought the experience from the partnership in shaping this new programme.
No, not at all. We have been informed consistently that we would be kept abreast of any new developments. We would be consistently kept informed. No one from DFC, no officials overseeing this programme has been in touch with us at all.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And Chair, that flies in the face of everything we've heard from the department repeatedly about co-design. Here we have a partnership board who have a vast amount of on-the-ground experience that appears not to have been taken into consideration. At least they haven't been engaged with to any great extent. And I can add that to that from my own personal experience. I've engaged with the department also, and I've faced the barriers in terms of getting answers for TWN and the partnership in respect of WIC. Can I also ask Elizabeth, Norma or Amanda, you mentioned in your briefing document that there were 3 separate SLAs. Why was that?
I'll tell that I don't know, to be honest with you, because whenever the extension to the programme, which was the 6-month extension, which we finally got at the end of March, beginning of April, referred to a new SLA, I then asked the question, obviously through my board as well, is does this supersede, where does this fit within the original SLA? And then they went away and they came back and they issued another SLA, which flew in the face of what we had agreed at a meeting, so we couldn't sign it. It was what they were actually asking for was that we would conduct 110 training needs analysis in less than a week, which was impossible, and we couldn't sign something because it was setting us up to fail. So it went back and forward again through numerous emails, conversations, whatever, and eventually a third SLA arrived. I'm not even sure of its legality, but to keep the programme running and we couldn't keep women waiting, we signed it. So that was 3 that we had, and as I say, I'm not sure where it sits in the original SLA. I'm not convinced, at the beginning of the contract. I mean, it should have been, in my opinion, an addendum to the existing SLA, but, I don't know the question to that, Andy. That's my assumption, and that's why we couldn't sign it.
Thanks, Norma. I appreciate that, and certainly from what you've outlined, it would appear to me, when you should have been getting on with delivering a very successful programme, you were being put under further undue pressure and unnecessary pressure. You mentioned in your briefing overview in relation to challenges that you had faced with the new departmental team. Are you able to expand on some of those challenges that you faced?
I suppose, in fact, it's countering a lot of things that MLAs had been told or MPs had been told. It tried, a lot of the responses from the department seemed to put us in a very, very bad light, despite the fact that a lot of the things that we had done, there was good reason behind them. For example, in their new... what do you call it? Did you present, Elizabeth, the dashboard? The dashboard. If you look at it, it looks like we're performing quite poorly because the new dashboard doesn't count a woman as having completed the programme until she's completely left the programme. So, but there was no explanation or no area where you could explain that if a woman is at the start of the programme, she's not counted as a finisher, obviously. So that's one thing. And, you know, information that we have got from the committee, information that we have got from the MPs, we've asked, because we know the answer before we ask it, and we're told repeatedly, no decision has been made, no, I can't tell you anything, no, I don't know anything. If we ask anything, we're literally talked over. I mean, for example, at the last, we were told in May we could get back to work and do what we were doing. Like, come on, if we had left those women at the end of March, where were we going to pick them up? So we continued to work on. So it's things like that that undermine the work that we're doing. You're talked over when you try to ask a question or make a point. You know, I did ask, I asked the department the last meeting, where does this information go? And I couldn't get a clear answer. They became very defensive, which is the usual. We've asked on numerous occasions to meet face-to-face. At the last meeting, we asked to meet face-to-face. After one of the officials had said they wanted to come out and meet and greet some of the women. And I asked at the end of the meeting then, can we have a face-to-face? And we were told it was departmental guidance that they weren't to meet anybody face-to-face, which kind of really baffled me. Now, that is recorded in their own minutes. I'm not saying something that's not true. Amanda, I don't know whether you want to add anything in.
Just to go back to the relationship that sadly has broken down, there's been, in my mind, and you know, from I sit through all the meetings as well, there's been a lack of open communication and information sharing, and it really has a really negative impact on on us and on the women themselves, because we can't keep them updated. And it just adds to the anxiety whenever you're working with women. They said, where do we go now, or what's up next? And it's just been a very unhealthy relationship. I concur with everything that Norma and Elizabeth have said to date about the programme. The successes are unreal. I really fail to understand the new programme. I don't understand the rationale behind it or what they hope to achieve. The WIC programme, in my mind, and everybody that I work with, is a unique programme. And I feel that in order to build on what we've laid foundations, and we've built on those foundations. So what is it all for? The woman asks me, where do we go now? And I just say, I'm sorry, I can't answer that.
Also, can I come in there, Andy, just to answer your question about the challenges that we have had? Norma had alluded there to our first evaluation. You know, it highlighted the good relationship we had with DFC in relation to delivering this programme. The changes that went on throughout the programme and the changing of staff, departmental staff, had a really, really negative impact on the overall management of the programme on behalf of the department. I can't profess enough as managing this programme how much the DFC officials have pressured. I find it hard even to find the words to put to it. Us as staff working on it, TWN are the lead partner in the Regional Infrastructure Support Programme, which is also funded by the department. So it was very, very difficult to see two departmental managed and led programmes who we were lead partner of running so differently, being managed so differently by two different departmental teams. The RISK programme was hugely supported throughout COVID and managed really effectively by the department, to the point where 7 organisations received 12 months advance salary payments up front, being supportive. The whole ethos within the department is to reduce bureaucracy of paperwork and stuff like that. I can honestly say, in all my years of managing programmes, I have never ever experienced the pressure, the intense scrutiny, the level of paperwork, the level of reporting, to the point where I was personally receiving 11 emails over 2 days requesting information. Without them taking into account, this is a partnership. This spans across Northern Ireland, with 4 partners who then work with over 50 delivery organisations. So what it seemed to me that they continuously asked for different reports and paperworks in a short amount of time. You know, we need this by lunchtime tomorrow. Knowing that it was impossible to provide that. The stress, the impact on staff's mental health has just been outrageous. And I just can't understand why no one in the department at a higher level, at a senior level, is picking this up and dealing with it.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
I think it's worth mentioning, just on my presentation, I mean, we work with, on a very regular basis, women who are living under threat now because they've spoken out. Where do they go? What happens to them? Where's that support? Because we've built these women into community leaders. We've built them into people that will challenge. Where do they go? How do we protect them?
No, absolutely. I have two further questions, Chair, and I'm sure Kelly wants to come in. Can I just pick up, Norma and Elizabeth, on the dashboard that you'd mentioned? You may or may not be aware, a tool that we as MLAs have at our disposal is to write to a minister and ask for information, you know, in relation to that. So what you're saying is that the dashboard was changed. So if we were to write to the minister and ask her for an overview as to how many women are participating in the WIC programme, the information that would come back would not be a fair representation at that stage because of that dashboard. Would that be fair to say?
That's right, Andy. What has actually happened is when this new staff team came in, they changed all the original reporting mechanisms that the original team in the department had set up. So the dashboard has now changed over the last year and a half, where we can't report a woman participating on this programme until she is completed. So where we effectively have 539 women on the programme, maybe only 58 of them is completed at one stage. So we can only report 58. So we've challenged them repeatedly. We can't change anything within the spreadsheets. They lock the cells. We can't add anything. We can't write a rationale. For 3 months, we asked for an extra column to be put in, so at least we could write an explanation. We're very aware that we didn't know where these reports were going. So we don't know. We're left in a limb of whether that's the information the minister was getting or whether, you know, who was getting that information, and, you know, what it looked quite bad on paper, where the reality was very, very different.
And was that reporting change communicated to yourselves as to the rationale for that? Why the change?
No. If we ask questions like that, Andy, we're shut down. I was told on one occasion, let's not go down that rabbit hole. That was a response from the officials. Yeah,
I'm lost for words, and I'm not often lost for words, as colleagues will attest. Final question, can I ask, in terms of feedback on the overall programme, have you received feedback from the department, from the team, constructive or otherwise?
No. Andy, can I just add there, when we're talking about the dashboard and the reporting mechanisms, I mean, reporting systems that was agreed in the original procurement contract should not have been changed without significant consultation with us as delivery partners. And I would ask that the committee ask that question: why were we kept in the dark of those changes? That should have been done in consultation with us. This was the thing. We signed a service level agreement. We signed a contract with CPD at the start of this programme, and everything has changed from this new staff team came in, and they have wanted to run it like grant aid rather than a contract based. Not once, as me as programme manager or any partner, have been asked about outcomes of this programme. Not once have we been asked, you know, how far across we are in our OBA framework. Not once we have been asked, is it still aligning or is it contributing to the programme for government? Not once. We've just been asked, how many women, how much money have you spent, how much money have you not spent?
Yeah, it's startling to hear. It really is. Can I thank you each for coming here and being so open and honest with us. I've nothing else to add. Thanks, Chair.
Well, thanks, Andy. Kelly?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Norma, Amanda and Elizabeth. We had met recently, and as you said earlier, we received the press release out from the Executive Office just for the normal Assembly circulation of press releases, and I forwarded on to yourselves just to ask, were you aware of this? And I have to apologise that that's how you got the news that how the new funding was coming out, because I had assumed that communities would have at least acknowledged you guys, but I'm very sorry that that was such a shock when you received my email. I'm going to ask you a number of questions because I would like them to be on record, if you don't mind. It just means then that when the department look back at this, that they have some clarifications. So you had a contract, not a grant, isn't that right? Yes. You just said
that's right.
Yeah. So you had a contract, not a grant. At the end of a contract, normally there's a winding down period of time so that you can prepare people who have been serviced by that contract, that's the women who are in the community, time to have feedback and time to realise that it's coming to an end. Were you allowed that opportunity at all? Because I believe your contract now, even with the extended SLA, finishes at the end of September.
We had no consultation, we had no conversations. We have a checkpoint meeting once every month, and at every checkpoint meeting we asked continuously from the August before it was supposed to finish in March. We were asking what's happening in March, how does this finish, what do we tell women, do we need to prepare women to move on, do we need to try and signpost women? We just kept getting the same answer. Can't tell you, no update. No, we weren't. We had no idea. Okay. And that was part of the problem, Kelly. I believe that as this was a contract, previously, before this particular team came on board, we had an equal partnership working with the department. Everything was done equally. Checkpoint meetings were really productive. Everybody worked together. We were looking for additional stuff to bring into the programme. Both the departmental officials and ourselves consistently worked together on an equal partnership, on an equal footing. That totally diminished. We felt as if that we tried our best, but we were being controlled by departmental officials. That's how it's felt the last 18 months.
Okay, thank you. So you're having regular meetings with the department about the contract and you're asking for the end part, you know, what happens. So that obviously hasn't happened. We're coming up close now to the end of September. And unless you apply for this new thing, that's it, over for yourselves. What I wanted to check was, in those departmental meetings, have you ever received a complaint or advice from the department to say that you're not meeting the women involved in community transition programme?
No, absolutely not. Not at all.
There's never been any issue with that. Now, of course, it's up to the department whether they decide to continue on with a grant or continue on with a contract or move to grant. And I think that you've been very clear, I know when we met, to say that you were prepared to go and apply for another grant, you know, or contract when it came forward. But what I wanted to ask you about before I'll come to my final question is, could you just define, just for the record, what the intervention forum is and why it should have been important that they were consulted?
Okay, the intervention forum is made up of representatives of the programme, people who have completed the programme and are, well, some are still continuing. Any woman who registers on the WICT programme can sit on the forum. It's an open forum. It's representative of all 27 locations. Within it, it has its own subgroups where, you know, they would work on different elements. They are the voice of the women on the ground. They are the voice of the women working in these communities. So the intervention forum aimed to be, considering, you know, this is an ongoing programme and women have joined lately, some women have been there a number of years. They have an action plan, a live action plan that now they're not going to be able to work through. COVID had a bit of a detrimental impact on that, however, it's still there. They're looking at, you know, we're working with local police, we're working with different crime agencies, we're you know, we're talking to different representatives in different areas, depending on where paramilitary activity is higher than others. We're working with trying to get the voice of women on change of attitudes. When we first started this programme, we did a scoping exercise on the attitudes of women around paramilitaries in their communities. A big factor, I'll give you an example, was would paramilitary related or ex-prisoner organisations receive money under the Fresh Start programme. And at the beginning of this WIC programme, women's attitudes were very, very much, well, absolutely not. They shouldn't be. They, you know, we did a report about 6 months ago on the impact of paramilitarism on women living in these communities. And the outcome of that shows a bit of a change in those attitudes, where now people are saying, okay, they can recognise that some ex-paramilitaries in different areas are contributing to peace and are working in peaceful means, and, you know, the attitude of maybe they should be, you know, allowed to work in organisations, etc., that do get money from Fresh Start. It also highlighted areas where a lot of paramilitary activity is increased. So the intervention forum is working in that kind of remit, Callie, where it's the voice of those women on the ground. It's getting the issues on the ground and being able to work on them, wanting to be the voice between government and women on the ground on the impact of paramilitarism on women.
And the department know exactly what the intervention forum is and how to contact them and so on. So when we talk about the lack of communication, there was a perfectly made body of women who have been through a programme, their leadership has been developed, who could have been consultees on the development then.
Absolutely.
I think, I would say the forum were part of the group that commissioned this piece of research by Dr. Lisa Byrne. It was sent round all the departments because it was such an important report, and again the officials had to admit they hadn't even read it. We asked them, have you read the report? No.
So just to reiterate then, you have the intervention forum, which is developed through the programme, that's got a group of women who've had their leadership developed and they could have been a voice to provide consultation. You have never received a complaint about the WIC programme from the department. You had a contract, but when you were asking about the end of the contract, they didn't have any information for you. The relationship seems to be quite tense between yourselves and that team. I take it you've moved to, or have you moved to writing only communications with them?
Yes.
Okay.
For quite some time, Ellen.
Okay. Doesn't sound
too... Can I just add something in there? 2 points to make. One, what you were asking originally around the programme coming to an end. Just recalling that, at the outside of this process, when we did the whole co-design, there was commitment given by both DFC and DOJ that this programme would be different, that this programme would be unique. There was a lot of talk around that table of the experts that, what happens in the funding world is that these programmes are given out and they just stop, and when women are left and they're dropped. And there was commitment around the table by both departments that this is different. That wouldn't happen. That women wouldn't be left high and dry, as that's what's happened with various grant programmes throughout the years. But yet here we are, exactly that is happening. And something else I wanted to touch on about the departmental officials. I have to say, and I'll say to all committee, we don't care who we work with. We will work with anybody for the benefit of women. And as I've always said for the last 5.5 years, it doesn't matter about us. It doesn't matter about Twin or Cooperation Ireland or Intercom, the 4 partners. What matters here is these women. And this new proposal and the departmental officials that manage this programme do not take that into consideration. Women are forgotten about. Women are just numbers on a spreadsheet to them. And that's the really, really frustrating part. No one's considering the women here. It's all about the departmental, the bureaucracy, the let's change it to grant programme. I don't care what it is, as long as it services these women, and it's not.
Can I ask you then, just this is coming up, Chair, sorry, my final couple of questions. So you mentioned in your presentation that many women will be dropped, and you've talked there about, women not continuing on. With what has been put out in the press release, the Developing Women in Community programme is now open. Why will the women, just explain to us so we have it on record, why will the women who've been through your programme or who are on the intervention forum or any of those people, why would they not be able to go on to what's being proposed here, or whoever may apply for it?
Very simply, it's far too basic from what they've already done. It would give them no benefit whatsoever. I think also it's important, if you look at the nuts and bolts of the programme, if you're talking about 30,000 per project, and remember as well, you must be based in that area to apply for it. You'll be funding 9 organisations across 135 women, and the value for money for that is £2,000 per woman, to do a very, very basic programme. Under our programme, our cost analysis is a lot smaller than that. But that's the answer, Kelly. Why would they do something that's more basic than they've already done?
Also, if you look at the areas, the areas that this new proposed programme is going to be run in, they're taking into account council areas and DEAs. That wasn't the original agreement on the Tackling Paramilitarism programme. Tackling Paramilitarism programme covers 8 high-level areas of where paramilitaries are deemed to be paramilitary activity is deemed to be at its highest. The areas in this are not covered. I'll give you an example. Lurgan, Kilwilkie, one of the big areas at the beginning of this programme where paramilitary activity was very high, dissident activity is very, very high. It's not covered here in these areas. I personally can't understand where they've came up with this. Is this, at the outset of this contract, it was evidence of paramilitary punishment attacks, it was evidence of crime, it was evidence of paramilitary activity from PSNI statistics that were taken into account to come up with the areas that this programme should run in. That seems to have went missing now. I don't know why it's running in these areas that they're proposing.
I have quite a difficult question here at the end for you, and I don't mean to upset anybody. I just wanted to ask, with the end of the contract at the end of September, it hasn't really given the organisation enough time to give protective notice to staff. So you're faced with that. But could I ask, does the end of your contract cover your known liabilities? So if there are staff that do have to be made redundant as an outcome of the end of the contract, will the organisations have to fund then their redundancy and the period of redundancy negotiation?
Yes, because again, every penny, Kelly, that has came through this contract at the beginning is generated and aimed at the women. There's no profit margin, nor would we be interested in that as for charities. So every piece of contractual money that has come in is played back into the programme. So yes, it'll have to come either from the management fee, which wouldn't cover our existing systems, our existing monies.
So the contract doesn't include that end of contract allowance for redundancies. Okay. I'm really sorry that I was the one that sent you the email that probably caused quite a bit of upset, folks. I thought that the department would have shared that with you before you got it from me in an email on a Tuesday afternoon. But no, I think that you've raised quite a lot of questions. I hope that we've asked a lot of information from yourselves. I'm sure it's quite taxing on you. It's quite a concerning time for the women and for yourselves, and thank you very much.
Yep,
Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. Is there anybody else? Mark wanting to come in? Mark, come in. Bring Mark in.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Norma, Amanda and Elizabeth. It's clear from listening to this and sort of as we've seen it pan out over the past couple of months that this has been pretty shoddily handled. I think that's probably an understatement, and we've seen today in the submission, and I'd certainly heard before testimony from women from across the north who had benefited from this programme. You've said there that you've never received a complaint from the department about the WIC programme. Are you aware of any complaints or issues that may have been raised by anyone else with the department about it?
No. No. If there's ever been a complaint, Mark, we have never been informed of it.
Okay. Well, neither am I. I was just.
I know. I thought worried there. I was worried. Like, no, but no. Any of the women that, and again, the women are, in putting it bluntly, would be more than happy to speak to yourselves. Have found this programme unique and different, and something that has given them confidence and given them, I suppose, support, Mark, to go forward in dealing with the issues. I mean, I alluded to how some of our women have been out on peace lines trying to control peace, and that has happened up in Derry, so Londonderry as well. They're very courageous women, very courageous, and our concern now is, are they going to be left? Because, as Kelly asked, the new programme offers nothing to them. There's no synergy or join up. But yes, there's never been, to our knowledge, and there's certainly never been brought to our attention, any complaint.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mark, thank you. Sorry, Amanda, did you want to come in?
Yes, if you don't mind, just to go back to the point about how unique our programme is and how we differ from the one that's now been suggested. We have a module within the programme that's a woman in the justice system. And that gives the woman, it's a very broad term, but that the woman decided to focus on the women who are in prison and the reasons behind their imprisoned, the inequalities that exist within communities and the specific circumstances some women find themselves in. So to follow this through, we arrange visits for them to go to the prison and to meet with these women and to find out just about their lives and why they were there and just the level of disadvantage they've experienced or how they experience these things. And they come back out and they then talk to the governor. Taking this further, we then arranged a visit to go up and meet Judge McElhone and tell him about the programme and how the women themselves wanted to affect change within their own communities and the work that they were doing. And he was so pleased with it, and he came back to them saying, this is exactly what he wants the woman in these type of areas to do, is to take the woman who, but not all women should be in prison, as we know, and there's better ways of dealing with it. And so he commented about the situation in England where women's groups, similar to what some of these women are in, they take them under their wing and mentor them. And of course, mentoring is one of the skills that we also offer to the women. But just to show you the uniqueness of this, that the women followed this through, were determined to find out how they can help, and are still working on issues like that as well. So that opportunity will never arise in this new programme. And that's just one aspect about the uniqueness of this programme.
Thanks, Amanda, for that. I'm completely shocked as someone who's, as you know, has worked within the women's sector for many years. And we know over the last 20 years we have seen lots of projects that have been delivered here in Northern Ireland, and for so many times, over the years, the call has been, where do the women go from here? And I mean, this is the perfect example, as you say, where we have a cohort of women who have upskilled themselves, are taking part in the decisions within their community, are enabling their communities, and to offer then a programme that is taking a retrograde step for them, I think that is just wrong. It has been something that has been an issue for many, many years, as to we train women up to a certain level and then we leave them hanging. And that has happened through many, many programmes. And it would be such a shame to see those women who have been upskilled, who have found that empowerment, to leave them at this juncture and say, I'm sorry, we can't help you any further. You've gone as far as you can go. So that I mean, just as one example, is just wrong on so many levels. And we as legislators here in this government need to take action on that. We can't allow that to happen. There has to be something. There has to be some sort of follow-up. We can't just roll out courses for courses' sake. that we don't have the money to do that. And you know something, actually, you really are, you're actually making women seem that they're actually lesser than what their value really is. I think that this committee will do whatever it can to progress this matter further. I think it would be an idea for us to ask the department to come up in front of us next week to answer some of those questions. I don't think it's a written briefing is required. I think it's an oral briefing that is required, because I know certainly even from the Minister's perspective, the Minister is a strong supporter of women and women's rights within the community. So I don't know whether she has been a party to all of this that has been going on behind the scenes as well. So we need to get those answers. But I'd certainly, in the first instance, I don't know if the committee agree that we should have an oral briefing from the department, because we are coming to the end of the term of your contract. So we'll do that for next week. But there are lots of questions there. The department will be forwarded these questions prior to that. I would imagine they'll be listening in as well to hear just what is being said. But we will certainly do whatever we can. Not for you, but for the women, and because we can't allow to bring women so far and then just drop them, as if their continuation is not important to us. So that would be my suggestion. I know members will agree with that. Anything further members want to add on the way forward at this present time?
Could I just ask, could we ask or write to CPD about the contract? Because obviously the contract for the partnership was extended, but it seems quite strange to me that it moved from a contract to an SLR whenever it was agreed and signed through CPD. So it's just to find out from CPD what are the terms, especially given the fact that the contract is coming to an end without any associated end costs.
Okay, no, we do that also.
I mean, our thoughts on that, Kelly, is that reporting systems agreed in the original procurement contract shouldn't have been changed without significant consultation with us as a delivery partner, and we were kept very much in the dark with all of that. I'd also ask, if you don't mind, that if you do that, and I know you're very busy people, but please look at this funding. There's a whole value for money element caught within that. We have trained far more women, provided much more on far less, and you're putting a call out for projects when really you're going to fund 9. So as I say, if you do, please look at the conditions, and you'll see it's a family orientated programme. So and on that, thank you very much.
Thank
all of you.
No, thank you. We really appreciate you coming in at such short notice, and the committee has worked on this over recent months and has been asking questions, but we will continue to further ask those questions. So Norma, Amanda and Elizabeth, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, members. Thank you for that. Members, we've gone through all of our business for today. Just to remind you, our next meeting again is at 9 o'clock next week. Can we then we're going to go into closed session to look at the forward work programme. So thank you.
Is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29.